I'm from Nebraska. So speaking of having nothing to do in your home states, that's me. I did Congress all 4 years of high school and sometimes public forum. And then I currently coach for an all boys Catholic school here in Nebraska. But I'm going to be leaving in the fall and starting law school. So
Oh my gosh, exciting.
Awesome. Good luck. Yay. Okay, I got
thank
the
you.
y'all can start the house elections now. And FYI, it's gonna be live streamed, okay?
All right.
And good luck, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. So we can go ahead and get started with our presiding officer elections. We're going to be using straw poll unless there's only one person that wants each one, and then we'll do acclamation. But with that, are there any nominations for your session 1 presiding officer? Representative Dixon.
I'm going to go ahead and nominate Representative Pascarella.
I humbly accept.
All right. Representative Baker.
Motion to nominate the Honorable Representative Klaus.
I humbly accept.
Representative, is it Barrow?
It's Barrow. That was really close, though.
Barrow.
I'd like to nominate Representative Wu.
I accept.
All right. And let's see. Representative Sharda.
I nominate Representative Wu.
I humbly accept.
All right.
Motion.
Representative Dixon.
Motion to close the floor for PO nominations.
Second.
Are there any objections? All right, we will close the floor for PO nominations. And let me just finish up this poll really quick and I will send that out.
Should we do our speeches first?
Yes. So we'll just do it in the order that they were nominated. So we'll start with Representative Pascarella.
All right, hi everyone. My name is Senator Pascarella. I'm so happy to be in this round today with all of you. Congratulations on making it. It's a huge honor, even with the delay in getting started. As a presiding officer, I have over 90 hours of experience on the virtual circuit alone, many countless hours of experience in person as well. Most recently, I presided at the final round of my district qualifier in New York City for the NSD tournament. In that round, I actually won. And I also won the Catholic National Tournament 2 weeks ago as a split PO in the final round. But all that aside, as a presiding officer, I prioritize most of all being efficient and being ethical. I'm already very prepared for this round. I have the preset recency on a virtual recency sheet that has 4 sections. The first section is recency for questions and speeches. The second is a schedule for the entire event. The third is a list of my rules as a PO, so you can refer to that at any time. And the fourth is a list of all the links you could possibly need for all of NSDA. But above all, I want to have a fun, fast, and fair round where everyone has the equal opportunity for their voice to be heard. Thank you so much. Please consider voting OP for PO.
All right, thank you, Representative Pascarella. We'll now have Representative Klaus.
Hi, everybody. Just like Representative Pascarella stated, congrats on making it just to this level of debate at nationals. I know it's been a really tough year. Being able to compete at the stage is just a testament to your grit and determination for sure. My name is Representative Klaus, and I'm hoping to be your PO this session. The pedestals of my PO performance are equity and efficiency. I'm not going to be a PO that allows people to shout over each other or go over time in questioning, because I know that can oftentimes perpetuate biases and disparities in round, as well as just disrupt the flow of our round. I also want to make sure that we go over pronouns and name pronunciation before the round starts, so we can make sure everyone feels accepted. I've been fortunate enough to have had the opportunity to have served as a PO at dozens of state level tournaments and national level tournaments like Harvard and Stanford. I'm really excited for the opportunity to PO today, because hearing everyone's stories and unique styles is a really big part of why debate is so special to me. So I would really appreciate your vote for me as PO so we can have a fast and fun session. Thank you.
All right, next we have Representative Wu.
Hey everyone, my name is Representative Zach Wu. I'm representing the Illini District today, and I would be thrilled to serve as your presiding officer. This past season, I've been accumulating hours of virtual presiding experience just to ensure that I'm super equipped to make sure this round runs as fairly and efficiently as possible. As a presiding officer at tournaments like Yale, Harvard, and Glenbrook's, I've won numerous awards doing so, including most recently winning my state's state championship in part from presiding. I value a couple things before all else. First is transparency. I strive to be as accountable as possible to the chamber by giving you all access to my spreadsheet where I keep track of precedents and recency for speeches and questions, ensure this chamber is equitable, and y'all can see what I'm doing at all times. Second is efficiency. I'll endeavor to be as fast as possible so that everybody gets as much time to speak as possible so that everyone gets the same opportunity to show the judges just how amazing you are. All the candidates up here today are going to be excellent POs. I trust that. I'm all about keeping things standard and simple, so I'd be honored to get your vote. Thanks.
All right, thank you, Representative Wu. And finally, we have Representative Liu.
All right, good morning, y'all. And once again, congrats on advancing to the semifinal round. It's been an honor to be here with all of you. And I know we've already had such a wonderful hour with us, and I hope to continue that. I don't want to spend too much time on my background, but I will say I'm very experienced at the state, local, and national levels. Most notably, I was the top presiding officer at the Long Beach Invitational, but I know that all the candidates are very experienced as well, and nobody's achievement should dictate your vote. I want to be the person that ensures equity is delivered in this chamber and that we accomplish the goals set forth by those who run this tournament. If you don't believe me, look at my results. In every chamber I've been in, every single person has gotten to speech. I know that together we will have a fun and phenomenal round. Please consider me as your presiding officer. And once again, that's Representative Liu.
All right, thank you to all of the candidates. I'm going to send out a straw poll link. So just go ahead and vote there. And once we have 12 votes in, we will see what the results are.
For the parliamentarian, I just have a question. In quarterfinals, what we did was the first place vote getter gets to choose which session they preside, and the second place vote getter gets to choose the other session. I was under the impression that semifinals would be the same. Is that true, or do you have any information on otherwise?
The winner of the PO election gets to choose their session, and then second place would get the other session.
Okay. Awesome.
Victoria, will we vote again, like remove the first place PO and then vote again?
I think it's from this session that you are determining both your POs, but I can check back. I can check and then let you know for sure. I think
Okay.
that's how it works because all four of them are running, correct?
Yes, they're all
I mean,
running.
like they all spoke this morning. I was
Mhm.
okay.
Yeah, what
Go ahead.
what we did in our last session was that we had both votes in the beginning. So the first person vote would win and choose their session. Then we would have another vote with,
Mhm.
I think it was the two other people from like the two persons that were right behind the winner. And then after that, the votes were distributed to that person. And then we went from there.
Oh, well, Tab said first place in this morning election gets to choose whichever session, and second place gets the PM session or the vice versa. But I
Okay,
will
so-
verify that and come back to you, and I'll text you, Ms. Richardson.
Okay. Are you all able to see the results too, or is it just me as the creator? Oh, you are? Okay, in that case, it looks like we just got our 12th vote in, and there's not a clear majority winner, so we are going to have to do another round of
I do see
runoff.
a clear majority winner based on the results.
It has to be over 50% of the votes, and that would be 7 votes. And we don't have 7 votes for any one candidate. So we're gonna have to do another round, and they told us typically this next round of voting is between the top. You drop the lowest, but since there's a tie for the lowest, there's actually going to be a runoff for them, and then we'll do a runoff between the winner of that and then the top 2 of this round. Does that make sense to everybody? Does anybody have disagreement on that? Okay. Sorry, I just have to record this really quick in my spreadsheet here for tab. And then I will create a second poll.
We have inquiry.
Yep, go ahead.
To clarify, the straw poll that we're going to be doing now is based on whoever wins that is the one that continues to go into the regular session, because the person that loses that round will be dropped from the PO list, correct?
Yes, so it's going to be a vote between Representative Pascarella and Lou. And then whoever wins that, it will be a vote between Wu, Klaus, and the winner of that.
Thank you.
Okay, so 5, 3, 2, 2. Okay. Let me create another poll. So it's between Pascarella and Lou. Alrighty, there's your second poll. Okay. Still waiting on 2 votes just to come in. Okay, so we do have a winner on that. It's Representative Pascarella. So you will continue on to vote. Our vote 3, which will be between Wu, Klaus, and Pascarella. Let me just record that results really quick here. 8 and 4. I need a second screen for this. Okay. This is vote 3. Just waiting on 2 more votes, it looks like. Okay, 1 more. We're still waiting on 1 more vote if somebody has not yet submitted. I'm still waiting on that last 12th vote.
Just checking in, have all the candidates voted? That could be a problem.
If everyone would just make sure, because I turned off browser duplication, so you shouldn't be able to vote again.
I think
Okay,
we just got the 12th vote.
yep, we just did. Okay, so it looks like we did get a clear majority winner. So Representative Wu, congratulations. You have over 50% of the vote. So you will be our first, you'll get to choose which session. And then Victoria, do we do another vote between the two, or
It's second
do-
place who has the most votes from what you just did.
from this round? So Representative Klaus would
Correct.
be
Yes, ma'am.
the other PO. Okay. So Representative Wu, would you like to be presiding officer first session or second?
I will take second session. Thank you.
Okay. And Representative Klaus, would you still like to be your presiding officer for session 1?
Yes, definitely. I'd be honored. Thank you.
All right, congratulations. With that, I will hand it over to Representative Klaus.
Okay, perfect. Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the semifinal session at Nationals for 2021. My name is Representative Klaus. That's going to be spelled C-L-A-U-S, and I'm so grateful to be your presiding officer for this session. Congrats on surviving, 5 or 6 sessions of online debate thus far. Battling Zoom fatigue is no easy feat, so props to you guys. My foundational goals of presiding are to preside not only fairly, but efficiently. Even though I am still a competitor, and if I do well, I would appreciate my rankings to reflect that for my service, I want to just blend into the background and step up to lead rules-wise when I'm needed. First of all, we want to make sure that everyone here feels accepted today. So I do have a question for the parley. Would you be okay if we just sent our pronouns in the chat, just so everyone's kind of aware and we don't accidentally misgender anyone?
Yep, that is fine with me.
Perfect. So if everyone could do that, I will send mine.
Point of inquiry. Could we
Yes.
just stick to using just representative or senator for every single person? That way we just don't ever end up with any.
Yes, exactly. That was going to be my follow-up. If you can, please try to avoid using pronouns just in case. We just want to be safe for everybody. But in case you really can't get out of it in the structure of your sentence, they are in there just in case. All right, moving on. I also just wanted to take a moment to say on a related note, if you think anything's off or icky in today's round, the NSDA has set up the equity office and I can guide you to that if you would like. Secondly, I have just dropped my PO spreadsheet into the chat. Wait, there we go. And my PO spreadsheet contains my information, the tournament legislation, the docket order, which I will update, some rules in case anyone needs them, as well as my preset precedency and recency charts. And again, just to check with the parley, is questioning going to be the reverse of the speaking recency?
That's what they've been doing in other chambers that I've seen, is just reverse recency for what was established. But if there's a different method that the chamber wants to agree upon, that's fine with me.
Yeah, Representative Gorin.
Point of order. I believe at ceremony meeting when we asked, or not the opening ceremony, apologies, sorry. In the first at that time, it went by the order of speakers. So it followed the same exact order. I'm not sure if they changed the rules for semifinals, but I do know for the first preliminary sessions that it was in the same order.
Okay, that is not how my rounds have done it, but I do know that there probably are some differences. Parley, should I take a quick vote of what we want to do, or do you want to move forward with a specific procedure?
I will let y'all decide. It's your chamber. I don't know if you guys want to do a straw poll and vote on using the preset recency chart, or if you want to do reverse recency. That's totally up to you guys and how you want to decide it.
Yeah, I might just do placards if everyone's cool with that, just because I don't want to be waiting on that last vote again. So our 3 options are going to be moving off of randomness, so I'll just randomly pick, moving off of the speaker order, or moving off of reverse speaker order for questioning. So all those who wish to use randomness to decide questions, please raise your placard. Okay, I see 1, 2, 3. I believe that's Representative Baker, Dinesh, and Gorin. And then who wants to use the exact speaker order in that order for questioning? Okay, I see 1, Representative Dixon, 2, Representative Liu, 3, Representative Wu. Okay, and then who wants to use the reverse speaker order for questioning? Okay, Representative Barao, Representative Noonan, Representative Jiang, Representative Pascarella, and Representative Sharda. Okay, on a vote of 3 to 5, we will just stick with using the reverse speaker order for questioning. That is how I currently have it in my spreadsheet, so just let me know if you have any further questions about that. And along those lines, if you ever see any discrepancies, just feel free to ask. I'm also going to be tracking on paper just to ensure the utmost accuracy, but always feel free to point of order or point of inquiry. So let's go over time signals next. I understand it can oftentimes be difficult online to see time cards, so I have color coded mine. I'll give you the green at 2 minutes, the orange at 2:30, and the red at 2:55. At 3 minutes, I will begin a countdown from 10 on my hands, and if you choose to speak past 3:15, I will have to verbally cut you off. Please don't abuse my grace period so we can move as smoothly as possible, especially if we want to get through extra speeches. That being said, I know there might be some lag, so I'd strongly encourage you to self-time if that is possible for you. For questioning, we are going to use direct questioning. I'll be counting down from 10 on my hands once 20 seconds has elapsed in your block. I also ask that you please don't shout over me or your opponents because I want to make sure the judges can actually hear you. That way they can actually judge you. If there are computer issues, you can migrate over the tech tab I have on my PO spreadsheet for some specific protocol that I like to use. You should contact tab room and possibly your coach if you have issues rejoining, and there's also some contacts for you to find me if that's what you would prefer. Also, if something seems to be off while someone's speaking, if that's okay with NSDA procedure, I would ask that everyone turn off their cameras in the chat just to reduce bandwidth, and then if we don't fix it, I can pause the speaker's timer and then give them a moment to readjust after I interrupt. So that's all the rules that I have. With that, are there any questions? Representative Pascarella.
Hi, so I have 2 questions. Will you be starting the 2.5-hour time from whenever our first speech was, or is it inclusive of the time we spent trying to elect a PO?
Our tab staff messaged me and told me that our official start time was 10:45.
Okay, so I will write that down, 10:45, good to know. What was your other question, Representative?
What is your procedure for trigger warnings before a speech when a speaker knows they might have something that could possibly be a trigger for somebody?
That is a great question. Honestly, if you do feel like you should provide that warning, then you absolutely should provide that. I would say before your introduction even begins, just to make sure that if people are uncomfortable, they can maybe take a point of personal privilege and exit the chamber. Thank you so much for asking that. That's a really important question. Are there any further questions? Okay, perfect. Then are there any motions? Representative Rowe.
I move to open the floor for docket nominations.
Is there a Representative Gorin? That is a second. Assuming unanimous consent, we are now going to open the floor for docket nominations. Representative Gorin, do you have a nomination?
I move to nominate docket A, which first consists of Taiwan, followed by Africa, followed by meat and dairy, and then Trans-Pacific Partnership, followed by single family zoning, followed by universal internet access.
Okay. Representative Wu.
Barring any other agenda nominations, I move to close the floor.
Is there a second? Okay. Hearing no objections and seeing no further nominations, we will move forward utilizing docket A, which reads Taiwan, Africa meat, zoning, and universal internet. I will put POs for, I also believe it is at the beginning of the chat, and the legislation is also linked in case the judges need it in my PO spreadsheet. All right. Seeing that we have gone through that procedure, I'm going to unilaterally move to open the floor for debate on our first bill, which is Taiwan. Are there any authors present? Are there any sponsors? Representative Noonan, you have the floor unopposed.
I thank the chair. My name is Representative Noonan, speaking for the first time this legislative session. And is anybody not ready? Perfect. Then I will begin. Representatives, one of the only places in the world that was able to have normal life in the past year is Taiwan. Through effective tracing measures, Taiwan has managed to mostly be free of COVID-19 and has given the world a critical example to follow. However, for all of the benefits they have brought to the global sphere, we are still allowing China to encroach on their rights as a free country. This is why I am proud to sponsor this bill to do the right thing and recognize Taiwan as its own independent nation. We must affirm today for two key reasons: to deter Chinese aggression and to stand up to China's abuses. First, recognizing Taiwanese independence and engaging in a strong military and diplomatic partnership as this bill mandates with them is a critical way to deter Chinese aggression. According to Janali Yang, founder and president of Citizen Power Initiatives for China, and Aaron Rhodes, president of the Forum for Religious Freedom Europe in May 2020. What is more, the United States will never allow Taiwan to be absorbed into China by force. An attack on Taiwan would start a devastating war between China and the United States and would destroy Taiwan. Recognition will simply make this official, so China and the US can move on in developing their relationship. China and the US are becoming more open and honest about their differences in the wake of the disastrous virus, and the US has less to lose and more to gain with a policy of realism and honesty. Right now, the biggest threat to Taiwan is in fact Chinese aggression. If something slips up, China has the ability to go into Taiwan, but it is very clear that we do not want that to happen, and China recognizes that the consequences of this would be dire. By recognizing Taiwan as an independent nation and forming a strong military and diplomatic partnership with them, we make it harder for Chinese aggression to trample Taiwan, and we make it official that China will never be able to take Taiwan, which is true in the status quo. In order to ensure that Chinese aggression never threatens Taiwan, it is critical that you affirm. But second, I want to turn to China's role in human rights and why it is critical we stand up to China in the region. According to Human Rights Watch in 2019, authorities dramatically stepped up repression and systematic abuses against the 13 million Turkic Muslims in China's Xinjiang region. In Hong Kong, a region promised a high degree of autonomy under the Sino-British Joint Declaration, the Chinese and Hong Kong governments hastened their efforts in 2018 to undermine people's rights. China has consistently placed human rights on the wayside, committing abuses that are sickening, and yet we still bend to their will on issues such as Taiwan. I acknowledge that there are consequences from departing the one China policy. However, we must be willing to take on the task because we have to stand up to China, and there are numerous human rights abuses in the region. When we stay silent, we are basically allowing China to commit these human rights abuses with no consequences. We have to take a stand against China. We have to do the right thing. We have to recognize Taiwan.
Thank you, Representative, for that speech of 3 minutes and 10 seconds exactly. Oh, I believe I'm frozen. Am I good to go? Perfect. All right, seeing as that was our first speech, we are now in line for 4 blocks of questioning. Would all questioners please raise their placards? Okay, that is first going to go to Representative Pascarella. Or wait, I'm so sorry, Representative Sharda first.
Thank you, Representative. So you mentioned in your speech that recognizing Taiwan would decrease the probability of Chinese aggression. However, you didn't outline a specific reason how this bill directly accomplishes that. Could you please clarify?
Yeah, so the reason that this bill specifically accomplishes that is, as I mentioned in my speech, the strong diplomatic and military partnership that we're enacting with Taiwan. That's having our embassy in Taiwan and engaging in a strong, clear partnership. Once we have that, China is less likely to directly invade because they know that we're there to stop them.
Representative Barrow.
Hey, Representative, in the past, have we worked with Taiwan?
Yes, in many ways.
Has China ever physically retaliated against us?
China hasn't physically retaliated against us, but they have expressed their discomfort with it.
They've verbally said things, but they've never actually physically enacted anything. So what in today's legislation would depart from past precedent?
We're making an embassy in Taiwan, and we are literally explicitly saying we
still, whenever we've worked with them, they've never done anything, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Representative Pascarella.
Have we ever taken an action as extreme as declaring Taiwan to be entirely sovereign?
No, we haven't.
Right. So why would that not create another response of much more aggression from China that actually result in an attack?
Because what we're going to be doing when we go into the region is that China knows that if they enact in a war with us, it's going to be disastrous for them. So what we need to do is we need to put our foot down in that region to ensure that.
Right, but if China already knows that a war is disastrous, then why do we need to intervene at all if they're not going to declare a war?
Because it's more likely that they're going to declare war in the
Senate. Representative Dinesh.
Hey, Representative, you've put this bill forward as a way to stop Chinese aggression. What exactly does it do that's new?
Like I said, we have embassies in the region and we're engaging in a military
All right,
partnership.
so let's talk about those embassies. We already have de facto embassies that we just don't call embassies. Is this bill just calling them embassies?
The bill is making it more official and it's making that tie stronger. Therefore, we
So
have
it
more
just
of a
makes it
precedent
more
of-
official? How does that
No.
stop China from invading if we
because
just
we have
make
a
it more
stronger
official?
and more explicit relationship with Taiwan, and it's more explicit. Right now, we basically
The
have
question period has elapsed. Speakers may be muted. In case you check the chat, we did get a message from Judge Armstrong, which did ask if anyone wanted to know judge paradigms. I was not sure on the outround policy of offering paradigms. So I guess it's up to our parley if we want to do paradigms since we already began.
I would hate to take out time from you guys' time to debate. I'm just going to post a link to my paradigm that's posted on Tab Room for myself personally, and the other judges, if they want to verbally give those, I'm fine with that unless there's objections from the chamber.
Okay, seeing no objections, we can move forward with paradigms if the chamber is comfortable with that. That will use up our debate time, I will note. That's why I personally did not move to do that. Perfect. There are some notes in the chat saying that you can read them on Tab Room, but if anyone wants to verbally offer paradigms, please feel free to do so now.
Okay, I'm going to do so now because you need to know how I'm grading you, especially in the final rounds. So I am a double diamond coach, and I am a stickler that if you are going to give me a claim or a warrant, that you support that with documentation, and that includes the author and the date, because I don't want to hear you making a decision about something. I grade you down for that. You have to have sources for what you're talking about. Okay, so it's important that I tell you that before we get started. Thank you.
Okay, are there any other judges who would like to offer verbal paradigms? Okay, seeing none, we will move forward with a negative speech. If you would like to speak in the negation, please raise your placard now. Out of those standing, that is going to go to Representative Jiang.
Thank you. This is Representative Jiang speaking for the first time today. If anyone is not ready, please let me know. Otherwise, I'll give it a few seconds and then get started. Okay, it sounds like we're good. All right, there's the PO. Cool. English comedian Russell Brand once said, "I've always had this impulse to be destructive. You know, he must be taking the words straight out of my opponent's mouth, because that's exactly what this bill is: impulsive and destructive. Foreign policy doesn't mix well with impulsivity. Fail this legislation for two reasons. First, because Taiwan's economy will sink due to Chinese retaliation. And second, because passing right now is destructive. This bill directly counters our decades-long policy of strategic ambiguity, and it's needlessly provocative. That's why first, you fail because Taiwan's economy will sink due to Chinese retaliation. According to the Washington Post on October 16th of last year, strategic ambiguity has managed for 4 decades to help keep China at bay regarding Taiwan. Representative Noonan says, once we have an alliance and an embassy, we'll be safe. But we won't get to that point. I'm sure representatives after me will debate about military escalations, but I'll talk about China's first move: to use Taiwan's economic dependence on them to their advantage. According to BBC on January 29th of this year, China is Taiwan's #1 trading partner and highest venue for foreign investment. And the RAND Corporation already warned in February of this year that China has overtly threatened to embargo imports from Taiwan or cut off mainland exports in order to cause economic chaos and break Taiwan's political will. Whether or not they want sovereignty right now, we are recognizing them today if you pass, and they're the ones who will suffer because of it. Representative Noonan, that's not defending our allies, if you ask me. But next, passing right now is destructive. Section 4 states that this legislation will take into effect immediately. Representative Noonan talks about Taiwan's success during the COVID-19 pandemic, but that success is coming to an end. Foreign Policy writes on June 2nd of this year that Taiwan's success facing the pandemic came to an end in mid-May after a daily trickle of local cases surged to triple-digit figures. And the New York Times just yesterday wrote that Yet for months, Taiwan has been unable to purchase doses of the BioNTech coronavirus vaccine, and the leaders blame Chinese intervention. This is just exacerbating Taiwan's vaccine shortage when they need more vaccines the most. And it isn't just COVID, because foreign policy continues that 2 island-wide blackouts occurring within 5 days among the COVID surge brought the country's glaring power issues, exacerbated by the effects of an ongoing drought, to the forefront. This legislation completely ignores their problems, and we declare their sovereignty now. Taiwan isn't ready. All in all, look at the title of this bill. Recognize Taiwan to defend democracy in the Western Pacific. When you pass, impulse becomes incompetent legislation, and democracy turns into the destruction of Taiwan.
Thank you, Representative, for that speech of 3 minutes and 6 seconds. We are now in line for 2 minutes or 4 blocks of direct questioning. Would all questioners please raise their placards? Out of those standing, that is going to go to Representative Liu.
Hi, Representative. So
Hello.
how closely have we aligned ourselves with Taiwan right now?
I think ever since the Biden administration came in, we are talking more with Taiwan.
But even before that, we did have an alliance with them, correct?
Sure, we had an unofficial alliance, and we've had
Then
a policy
what's the risk?
Go
I'm
ahead.
sorry, you can finish. Okay,
Okay,
then what's the risk of making?
We've had a policy of strategic ambiguity, which means that we don't necessarily ensure.
But what's the risk of making it official if we already do a lot of?
Okay, because
like, deals with them?
we're declaring Taiwan's independence. China's
Representative Baker.
Hi, Representative. So if Taiwan's lack of vaccines is because of Chinese constriction, why aren't we fighting for their independence to get those vaccines?
Yeah, we're not fighting for the independence
But we're
because
going to
passing this legislation will only make the situation worse. If you
Why would
pass
it make it
today,
worse?
this legislation enacts it right now. Right now, Taiwan is going through a COVID crisis. At least make sure that Taiwan's strong before you
But
pass this
China's
legislation.
already taking away their vaccines. So how can it get worse? They're already stopping them from getting medicine and vaccines.
Because okay, first of all, China.
Representative Noonan.
Okay, so do we have the ability to support countries through, say, sharing our vaccines with them?
Sure.
All right, so the moment we pass this bill and enter a strong partnership with Taiwan, why can't we share our resources with them, like vaccines, to get them to be a strong country, like you mentioned in your speech?
Okay, because vaccines aren't the only problem. The other problem is Taiwan's economic dependence on China.
Sure.
Before we can build a strong alliance and a strong relationship with Taiwan, they are going to lose.
Why? But why is our involvement not going to change that?
Representative Wu.
Thank you. Why is Taiwan economically reliant on China now?
I mean, I'd say that they export a lot of things to China. China is a big market for them.
Specifically, they're locked out of international globalized markets because they don't have sovereignty internationally recognized. When you pass this bill, does that change?
I mean, I'd say that over time it would, but immediately it wouldn't. And the problem is that when you pass this kind of legislation, when Taiwan is unstable, it'll only make the situation worse, and it could end up being terrible for them.
Question period has elapsed. Speakers may be muted. Seeing as that was a speech in the negation, we're now in line for an affirmative speech. Would all affirmative speakers please raise your placards?
Point of personal privilege.
State that privilege.
Exit the chamber, please.
Granted. And in the future, if you need to, you can just enter that in the chat because that might be easier if you need to interrupt a speech. All right, once again, I'm going to call for an affirmative speech. So would all affirmative speakers please raise your placards? Representative Baker, you win off of recency.
I thank the chair. For the judges, that is Representative Baker speaking for the first time this legislative session. I am at the leisure of all those above me, so I'll begin in just a few moments if that's all right. Democracy dies in darkness. My apologies to the judges and competitors today for this being the 100th time you've probably heard this week, but the Washington Post motto is no better analogy to why you must affirm today. For years, China's suffocating authoritarianism has been dimming the lights on Taiwan's democracy, and we cannot allow this to continue. Affirm today for the safety of our future and for why the negation's argument falls flat. To begin, we have to understand why recognizing Taiwan is so necessary for global safety. Because if Taiwan is recognized as a nation, it can save lives. The Washington Post reported that Beijing has been grinding away at Taiwan's international presence, blocking it from participating in the World Health Organization and other UN agencies. And in 2020, this had major consequences. When Taiwan heard about patients falling sick with a mysterious pneumonia in Wuhan on December 31st, Taiwan's health officials fired off an email to the WHO asking for more information. But Taiwanese and US officials seized the email to argue that the WHO ignored an early warning that the coronavirus could likely be transmitted between people. But because Taiwan is recognized as a part of China, it went unheeded, as the correspondent of the WHO replied to Taiwan, "Well, we've already talked about China." What this means is that Taiwan has been excluded from emergency meetings and important global expert briefings on the coronavirus pandemic when they had early information that no one else had. Taiwanese official Stanley Cao in 2020 stated that they were denied permission to even attend WHO annual meetings in recent years, leading to their sluggish response to one of our most dangerous pandemics that shut down the world. We cannot begin to encourage the UN to recognize Taiwan before doing so ourselves. The RAND organization finds that if the United States does not take action to assist Taiwan, it is unlikely that any other regional country would be willing to do so and bear the brunt of potential Chinese retaliation without US support. But let's look at the negations arguments today and see where they fall flat. To begin, let's look at Beijing itself, which won't retaliate. A study by Michael Cole at the National Interest in 2020 reports a consensus developed among a large member of defense analysis in recent years argued that despite the balance of power shifting in China's favor, Beijing has no intention to use its military to invade Taiwan at all. Doing so would be too costly, while others contend that Beijing can accomplish unification by creating enough economic dependence and incentives to convince Taiwan over time. But let's talk about the economy. To address Representative Zhang's point that China is Taiwan's top investor, she does not report that the margin between China and the other investors is very slim, as the British Virgin Islands is just 7% less invested. China only holds 20% of their stake, while the British Virgin Islands, the Netherlands, and Japan accumulatively hold over 40% of their investments. So representatives, we don't stand to cripple Taiwan, we stand to invest and continue strong democratic investments. So affirm today to not let democracy die in darkness and turn on the light.
Thank you, Representative, for that speech of 3 minutes and 2 seconds. We are now looking for 1 minute of questioning. Would all questioners please raise your placards? That's going to go to Representative Dixon.
Thank you for recognizing me. Isn't it China's goal to gain control of Taiwan?
Well, it is, but they're not allowed to do
great. And given that right now China has about 1,600 missiles pointed at Taiwan, does it seem like they're willing to back down?
Probably not, considering that we have also been supplying Taiwan with weaponry that is equal, if not greater than China's representation.
And in given days, seeing that China has passed an anti-sanctions law showing defensiveness, can't we see that they're willing to take action right now?
They're not going to take military action if that's what you're concerned about, but even economically, they're
Representative Gorin.
Representative, where in today's legislation does it say that we're getting rid of the one China policy or our adherence to it?
The one China policy is slightly different from this, but we are beginning the steps towards recognizing Taiwan so that we can carry that over to the UN.
When you create a military dependence on a country, does that increase or decrease reliance or dependence?
Considering that Taiwan is pretty reliant on the US itself, we're creating even more of a greater relationship.
Where in today's legislation does it say that we're recognizing Taiwan's sovereignty?
It states that we're beginning the process.
The question period has elapsed. Speakers may be muted. Seeing as that was a speech in the affirmation, we are now seeking a negative speech. Would all negative speakers please raise your placards? That's going to go to Representative Gorin.
I thank the chair for the judge's reference. My name is Representative Gorin, spelled Gorin, and I'm speaking for the first time in this session, this time on the negation. Can I please get a smile, nod, or some indication when you're all ready? Perfect, lovely, okay. The red, white, and blue of Taiwan's flag stands for liberty, democracy, and livelihood. But since today's legislation decimates Taiwan's liberty, dismantles democracy, and destroys lives, we must negate. First, passing today's legislation threatens democracy by emboldening China and betraying Taiwan. I want to clarify a misconception initially brought up by Senator Noonan, Jiang, Pasquarella, and Baker. That's because Section 1 of today's legislation officially recognizes China's sovereignty over Taiwan. Why is that especially dangerous? Because in doing so, we legitimize China's claim to the power in Taiwan and their one China policy. The Center for Strategic and International Studies reports on January 3rd of 2017 that the US has not taken action to
dismantle the One China claim, as the US recognizes the People's Republic of China, or the PRC, as the sole legal government in China, but only acknowledges Taiwan as part of China. The same article further reports that through this method, the US does not give in to Chinese demands in recognizing their sovereignty over Taiwan, but by passing, we also push Taiwan's remaining allies to recognize China's sovereignty and thereby weaken Taiwan's defense. Because Express reports on October 1st of 2020 that tensions between Taiwan and the US are increasing as China has began large-scale military exercises near the Parcel Islands in the South China Sea. The Guardian reports on September 7th of 2018 that support for Taiwan has been slipping away as China's incessant threats and bullying, as only 17 countries have refused to switch allegiances to China. Senator Noonan and Baker, if the United States, the leader of the free world, recognizes a communist authoritarian government responsible for human rights violations and the deaths and disappearances of hundreds of thousands in a land fighting for democracy, we would be betraying our allies. Next, I want to distance myself from Senator Jiang, who tells you that we should keep our current strategy, but instead we must stand against China. Why is it so crucial for us to support Taiwan instead of the current strategy we have today? Because Taiwan upholds our democratic values and plays a fundamental role in our ability to stand up against China. A New York Times reports on April 13th of 2021 that a US military intelligence report found that China is the single largest threat to the United States as it continues to push for global power. Senator Baker and Noonan, I agree, we need to stand against China. That's exactly why you negate. Because a US Navy Captain Fannell warns the House Intelligence Committee on February of 2021 that by 2030, China's Navy will be double the size of the United States with over 550 warships and submarines. He further warns that China plans to push the US out of Asia and become the world's predominant power. Section 1 of today's legislation formalizes our military alliance with China. Why is that detrimental? Because because China does not have the US's interest best at heart. They will weaponize any alliance we form into their favor as we undermine our own alliances. The Brookings Institute reports on January 25th of 2021 that China continues to exploit the ununited front of the US and our allies against us. Unifying those relationships is our only chance to stand up against the threat that China poses. Joining China to a military alliance only increases our ability to defend China. Senators, we must always support the red, the white, and the blue.
Thank you, Representative, for that speech of 3 minutes and 9 seconds. We're now on for 1 minute of questioning. Would all questioners please raise your placards? Representative Jiang.
Thank you. Okay, so the People's Republic of China currently governs mainland China, right?
That's correct.
Okay, and the Republic of China currently governs Taiwan, right?
Technically,
yes, they do. So if you recognize the Republic of China, that's separate from the People's Republic of China. Aren't you giving sovereignty to Taiwan?
That's not true.
But this legislation recognizes the Republic of China, which is Taiwan.
So you need to recognize, if you want to give Taiwan sovereignty, you need to recognize Taiwan, because the PRC is
no, it's the ROC, not the PRC that we're recognizing.
No, because
Representative Pascarella.
China, yeah.
All right, what is the formal name of Taiwan?
You tell me.
Republic of China, right? So when this legislation recognizes Republic of China and makes a military alliance with them, are we making the alliance with China or with Taiwan?
Right. So if that's the case, you need to the legislation itself needs to clarify that we're forming an alliance.
It's just a known fact on the international stage that the official name of Taiwan is Republic of China. Okay, doesn't that negate every single claim you make?
No, because today's legislation formalizes relationships and recognizes the official government of China.
Question period has elapsed. Speakers may be muted.
Thank you, Chair.
The Chair thanks you. Seeing as that was a speech in the negation, we are now searching for an affirmative speaker. Would all affirmative speakers please raise your placards?
Sorry, just an inquiry.
Yes.
I want to raise attention to the point of order in the questioning in the chat. Right, I think the questioning block should have gone to Representative Sharda instead of me.
Representative Sharda, I did not see you raise your placard. I am so sorry.
I raised it near the end. I can rescind my question. We can move on.
If you do want, we can extend the questioning period. That is totally up to you, but that would have to be a motion.
Order?
Yes, Representative Pascarella.
I don't think that we're supposed to do that because in a previous session, my parley said we're not allowed to extend the questioning time as per NSDA, like just procedures.
Okay, more chamber differences because that did happen in mine, but good to know. Thank you for that. All right, then seeing as that was a negative speech, we are now in line for an affirmative speech. Would all affirmative speakers please raise your placards? Representative Wu, I'm sorry, that goes to you.
Thank you. Hey everyone, Representative Zach Wu. This is my first time speaking today. I'm on the affirmative. Any indication when you're ready, I'm happy to begin. I'm just going to give you all a couple seconds because I know some judges have their cameras off and are getting ready. Okay, looks good. Let me just pin my PO. Awesome. For decades, the United States has quietly stood behind Taiwan, in many ways, the final bastion of democracy in East Asia. For decades, the United States has asked the question not of how we ought to act, but instead how China might react. It's time to stop letting China dictate the policy that this Congress produces. It is time to stop one revisionist regime from defeating democracy everywhere. There are only two salient questions to ask to resolve this debate. First is the question of what the United States stands to gain from formal recognition of Taiwanese sovereignty. Taiwan has long been the front line against rapid Chinese encroachment in the Pacific theater. To allow this wave of Chinese authoritarianism to rule the day signifies an enduring blow to American primacy. But second is the question of what China stands to lose from provoking a military hot war or responding through economic retaliation. The negative fundamentally needs to warrant why recognition of sovereignty is the straw that breaks the camel's back. If we already have arms sales, de facto military support, and diplomatic presence in Taiwan, what is it about this bill you have before you today that invites retaliation? On the first question, I don't think there's any reservations that Taiwan is of great importance to our interests in this chamber of Congress or any chamber of Congress for that matter. Both sides of the House today have agreed that defending Taiwan is a cornerstone of our interests. But the reason why recognition is specifically critical is to legitimize Taiwan both diplomatically and economically on an international level. Representative Noonan tells you that formalizing a military and diplomatic relationship strengthens our bilateralism. Then Representative Dinesh asks a very important question. Why pass if the legislation doesn't do anything dramatically different from the status quo? I'll answer that. The Yale Journal of Politics explains that Taiwan is facing growing economic isolation from being locked out of free trade agreements because the vast majority of nations do not recognize the ROC sovereignty. By the way, Representative Gorin, the ROC is Taiwan. While the rest of the world integrates into an increasingly globalized economy, Taiwan is left unable to capitalize on that globalization and unable to shake off its reliance on China. That's the reason Representative Zhang's argument is true. But when sovereignty has American support, it triggers international legitimacy by engaging other nations to throw their support behind Taiwan. Russell Xiao of the Global Taiwan Institute explains November 28, 2020, that if the Biden administration proactively formalizes support for sovereignty, it would engage like-minded democracies in the Trans-Pacific Partnership and the European Union to invite Taiwan to free trade agreements with important ramifications for Taiwanese resilience. So, Representative Zhang, if China does turn to economic retaliation in the short term, only the affirmative gets access to the impact level analysis about helping China to break away from that dependence. China has used military demonstrations and rhetorical brinksmanship as their MO for a long time. We have dozens of examples why China's are making empty threats without ever escalating action. It's time to call their bluff. It is time to affirm.
Thank you, Representative, for that speech of 3 minutes and 7 seconds. We're now in line for 1 minute of questioning. Would all questioners please raise your placards? Out of those standing, that is going to go to Representative Baru.
Hey, Representative, what would you say is the biggest super international organization in the world?
I think it's the UN.
Right? What does it take for a country to become a part of the UN as a sovereign nation?
There's like a long list of steps that you have to follow to get
one of the most important ones being that the country that originally owned that territory has to recognize them as sovereign. So what about today's legislation pushes China to recognize Taiwan as an independent territory?
You don't need China to recognize Taiwan.
Yes, you do. In past precedent, that's how the UN recognizes
free trade agreements. The UN's not a free trade agreement. I'm talking about economic dependence.
Representative Baker.
Hi, Representative. So has China made any outright statements about what they do if America recognizes them as a sovereign country?
Yeah, they use things like empty rhetorical threats and like military brinksmanship as their MO for like decades. Time to call their food.
But how can we be sure if it's empty when we haven't done it yet?
Okay, the net fundamentally has failed in their burden of warranting why recognition of sovereignty fundamentally pushes China over some like nebulous edge. I don't see that as true, especially if we have a relationship in the status quo. We're just strengthening it.
Question period has elapsed. Speakers may be muted. The chair thanks you. Seeing as that was an affirmative speech, we are now searching for a negative speech. Would all negative speakers please raise your placards? That is going to go to Representative Dixon.
Thank you for recognizing me. This is Representative Dixon speaking for the first time in this legislative session. That's Dixon. As always, I'm at the leisure of everyone above me. Just give me a verbal sign if you're not ready, and then a thumbs up from my PO would be great. All right, then let's get started on my first word. We've all heard the quote, keep your friends close and your enemies closer. Well, now that I'm recently vaccinated, I'm wanting to keep everyone close. That includes both Taiwan and China. However, my friends on the affirmative don't seem to share the same sentiment and are promoting a bill that does the opposite. To preserve global stability, I'm proud to negate, and I urge you all to join me. First, let's take a look at the fact that we do not want to anger China. Representative Noonan says that the affirmative will deter Chinese aggression, but that is blatantly false. See, the national interest in May of 2020 stated that in the first few days of Biden's presidency, Taiwan reported a large incursion by Chinese warplanes over 2 days. We can also see that the Taiwanese government said China flew the largest number of military jets into its air defense zone for a year. In response, the head of the Pentagon warned that a Chinese invasion of Taiwan is much closer to us than most think. Representative Baker stated that China isn't going to act, but we can see that they're not willing to back down. Additionally, The Atlantic in July of 2019 has stated that Beijing has an upwards of 1,600 ballistic missiles pointed at the island and is exerting ever-growing pressure on international business to label Taiwan as a province of China. We need to preserve global stability. Representative Wu asks why this is the last straw. Allow me to show you. This denial of Taiwan's sovereignty is not only one of the few areas of agreement between us and China, but it's also an important pillar supporting Sino-American relations. Since normalization in 1979, it has allowed the United States to balance the provision of essential support for Taiwan and acknowledge Chinese sensitivities enough to keep global balance. By taking that away, we're removing the last straw and causing global stability to crumble. China has not ruled out force to achieve Taiwan's reunification of the United States, and the United States has not ruled out defending them, but the only way we have the option to choose is by negating today. The South China Morning Post just last week reported that China has an anti-sanctions law that emboldens the state to target individuals and nations that are responsible for the imposition of economic sanctions against China. We can clearly see that China is on the defensive, and now is not the time to enact this piece of legislation. Next, let's move into economic relations. The National Defense Magazine in May stated that supply chain woes mattered worldwide for makers of everything from cars to clothing to home and medical needle containers. We can clearly see that right now we are more reliant on China than they are on us. Doing this and hurting global stability and hurting Sino-American relations is just going to hurt us the most. We can see that right now we have areas of strain in pharmaceuticals and microchips. A study by Nature Biotechnology in 2007 shows that China is the largest producer of APIs in the world. At a time where COVID-19 is hurting the entire global scene, we cannot take away this reliance on pharmaceuticals. We can also see that in the status quo, we have a need for microchips, and China has a large supply of those that we need to get as well. So today, to preserve global stability and to make sure we're not taking away that last straw, please join me in negating. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative, for that speech of 3 minutes and 7 seconds. We're now in line for 1 minute of questioning. Would all questioners please raise your placards? All right, that is first going to go to Representative Liu.
Thank you. Hi, Representative. So if we fail this legislation, what changes about our policies towards Taiwan?
Well, we can still have an alliance with Taiwan if we fail this today. We're just going to see that not only do we have the option to choose whether or not to support them,
But we still have economic and military interactions with them. How does that change our relationship with China?
Well, we're going to preserve stability with China because the fact that we haven't recognized
them. But we do everything to advance Taiwan in the status quo.
Yeah, so why hasn't China attacked yet? It's because we still aren't recognizing Taiwan as
Representative Noonan.
Okay, so what do you think is easier for China to do? Invade Taiwan with or without US backing?
Obviously, it's going to be easier for them to do it without US backing, but as I've already stated in my speech, the possibility isn't taken away to help Taiwan.
Right, so but if they're already encroaching on Taiwan in the status quo, isn't it better to actually provide assistance to Taiwan so they can defend themselves?
No, because we can clearly see that by showing that we're willing to support Taiwan over China would be the catalyst that would actually make China.
The question period has elapsed. Speakers may be muted. Seeing as that was a speech in the negation, we are now in line for an affirmative speech. Would all affirmative speakers please raise your placards? All right, that does go to Representative Liu unopposed.
I thank the president. Good morning or good afternoon to everyone. That's Representative Liu, spelled L-U-U. Nice, short, and simple. Just a sign from the judges, either virtual or physical, would be amazing. Thank you, Judge. Amazing. Awesome. Wonderful. All right. Everybody's ready, and I think we are all right to begin. I have a question to ask this Congress. How many times have we allowed fear of China's reaction to prevent us from taking action? And now I ask you this, where exactly has it gotten us? Time and time again, we have the same debate over using the same excuse and end up with the same result. Today, let's break that trend. Let's take action and pass this legislation. You affirm to fulfill our obligation to Taiwan. Representative Jiang and Dixon on the negation spend their entire speeches fear-mongering this Congress about how this bill would affect our relationship with China. But honestly, I'm confused as to what they expect by failing this bill. But here's the thing, taking this action does nothing to change our relationship. Representative Wu touched on this, but falls flat on giving you any examples. Let me pick up where he stumbled. The Cato Institute explains in November of 2020 that DC has already made it clear to China that we will protect Taiwan. We've already been supplying military aid. We've sent economic relief, and we even have a small marine presence in the region. Representative Dixon, this bill acts as the breaking. Representative Dixon acts as this bill is the breaking point in U.S.-China relations, as if they weren't already broken. Reuters reports in December of 2020 that even Chinese state media has made it clear that many aspects of U.S.-China relations are damaged beyond repair. Taiwan is no different. Representative Jiang, all this bill does is formalize our relationship with China and allow it to grow by sitting and doing nothing, changing nothing. I'm tired of this Congress basing its decision on baseless fear, but now there's no more excuse. So what does this legislation really accomplish? Sections 1 and 3 of this bill establish a military alliance with Taiwan and expands our presence in the region. Our presence is important because, as Brookings explains in April of this year, there is no way for America to protect Taiwan from afar because it would be impossible for us to act swiftly enough to deter Chinese aggression without having a presence in the region. In fact, the only real way America could protect Taiwan in the status quo is if they were to directly attack Chinese ships while they were docked on the mainland. Representative Dixon, that means that all the negation's fears about US-China conflict are worse off in the status quo because armed conflict is more likely. However, when you pass this legislation and expand your presence, you mitigate that risk. Forbes explains in March earlier this year that after analyzing the effect of our troops in the Indo-Pacific region, they found that having US troops present in Taiwan would effectively deter Chinese aggression. For too long, we've let the people of Taiwan live every day in fear. Today's our chance to change that. By deterring Chinese aggression, we will be able to save countless lives. This is the single biggest impact nobody on my side has brought up. The Council on Foreign Relations explains in February of this year that if Taiwan falls, China will gain far too much geopolitical power in the region to the point where they wouldn't just stop at Taiwan and increase expansionist efforts. Representative Jiang, before we have this debate again about the next region China takes over, before we use the same excuse and the same results, I ask you to stand. I ask this Congress, what do we stand for? And do we even stand at all? I implore you to let an affirmation victory be that answer.
Thank you, Representative, for that speech of 3 minutes and 13 seconds. We're now in line for one block of questioning. Would all questioners please raise your placards? Representative Sharda.
Thank you, Representative. So can you outline in a short answer, how does the U.S. benefit from this bill?
We aid with Taiwan. We have better presence in the region, and we can stop them from expanding, which they're already trying to do.
Okay, and does that trump China's economical and physical threats?
Yeah, a U.S. presence in the region would.
Why? How?
The United States, like our military presence alone, is such a great factor hindering China's expansion, and our economic power and ties is even greater, and we can
But why should we
Taiwan to the rest of
prioritize
the world.
that over economical and physical threats?
Because right now, Taiwan's at
Dinesh.
threat of being attacked.
Hi, Representative. You've pushed this bill as an idea to stop China from invading Taiwan, to protect the people of Taiwan. What about this bill does that?
Essentially, our military efforts that we're already seeing in the status
All
quo.
right, so this
like
bill
formally
formalizes
recognizing
our
just a better
military
Canada.
alliances. Do we already have
Yeah.
military alliances with Taiwan?
Like we sell them military like supplies, but not a formal alliance.
Not just that, we have an entire U.S. Navy fleet posted
Awesome.
next to Taiwan.
I'd argue
What
that this
about that
does
isn't
even
sufficient?
better. This does even better because right now our fleet is substantially lacking in the region, and this would just promote more security to Taiwan.
The question period has elapsed. Speakers
Thank
may
you.
be muted. The chair thanks you. Seeing as that was an affirmative speech, we're now in line for a negative speaker. Would all negative speakers please raise your placards? That is going to go to Representative Dinesh.
I thank the chair. For reference of the judges, my name is Representative Dinesh, speaking for the first time in today's session on the negation of the Taiwan legislation. Is anybody not ready for me to begin? All right. Far too often, when this Congress simply hears the word democracy, we rush headfirst into passing hastily drawn-up legislation. And when the consequences hit, we somehow have the gall to act surprised. Idealism is great, but it's no substitute for rational pragmatism. It's because poetry never made good policy that you should fail this legislation. Fail this bill because all it does is put a fresh coat of paint on US-Taiwan relations. Nothing really changes substantively. Representative Wu, I agree with you that US-Taiwan military cooperation is important, but we already do that. We covertly sell billions of dollars of arms and post a US Navy fleet there. All this bill does is just announce it officially. And Representative Noonan, as for putting an embassy on Taiwanese soil, we already have a similar institution, the American Institute in Taiwan, which is a de facto embassy, as The Guardian found in 2018. All this bill does is officially call it an embassy. Are you picking up on a theme? This legislation takes everything that China hates about the US-Taiwan relationship and tauntingly shoves it in their face. That's the risk with making it official, Representative Wu. And if we're going to taunt, we better be ready for retaliation. Now, Representative Wu, I'll answer your burden. I will be the first negation representative to show you exactly why China will react. Former Navy Admiral James Stavridis explains that formally recognizing Taiwan as a sovereign nation would anger the Chinese people and force the CCP to invade Taiwan in order to regain that legitimacy. When we brazenly advertise our actions, it puts political pressure on President Xi and forces him to respond in an aggressive manner, otherwise he'll lose the Chinese people's respect. Professor of Global Studies Gregory J. Moore found in 2016 that to allow Taiwan to leave would destroy the legitimacy of the CCP. Representative Wu and Baker, rational reasons for why China won't invade fall short. For President Xi, Taiwanese independence is an issue of national dignity. After defining his government by promising to reunify with Taiwan, Xi would lose all his power by reneging on that promise. On this issue, rationality doesn't matter for him, especially if other countries follow the US, Representative Wu, as you state. If we pass, the CCP's only options to retain their power will be to aggressively lash out. And Representative Liu, it's easy to idealistically say that we shouldn't care about China's reaction. But when we make bad decisions in this Congress today, we're not the ones who will be suffering the consequences. The Diplomat finds that a Chinese invasion of Taiwan would cost tens of thousands of Taiwanese lives, not to mention tanking the Taiwanese economy, which would make free trade agreements pretty worthless. Too often, I've seen this Congress pass idealist legislation and only think twice once the consequences have already been suffered. It's easy to stand up and thump your chest like affirmation representatives and proclaim that we must act to uphold democracy. But to really defend democracy, we must pass legislation that does good, not just ones that sound good. Rather than mustering the courage to pass, I pray that we heed the wisdom to fail.
Thank you, Representative, for that speech of 3 minutes exactly. We're now in line for 2 blocks of questioning. Would all questioners please raise your placards? All right, out of those standing, that goes to Representative Wu.
Thanks. So the entire warrant for why the status quo policy of strategic ambiguity isn't angering China enough to provoke a retaliation is because it's not formal, right?
It gives them a backdoor so that when they don't act, it's not widely publicized and it doesn't make their government look
China
weak.
a rational or irrational actor?
And when it comes to Taiwan, multiple professors, such as Gregory J. Moore, have found that they do act irrationally.
Wise for China to start a hot war against the United States and Taiwan?
Representative Wu, I don't know whether it's wise or not, but regardless of that, China has committed to doing
Representative
it.
Gorin.
Hi, Representative. What does the UN officially call Taiwan?
The Republic of China, I believe.
No, actually it calls it Taiwan's the province of China. So under today's legislation, okay, what did Prime Minister Scott Morrison warn ahead of the G7 summit?
I'm sure you can educate me on that,
So
Representative.
the Western democracies need to become interdependent in order to go over China. So how does today's piece of legislation like hinder our like ability to go ahead and do that? Like, why should we not stand up against China?
I'm sure
Question
we
period
should
has
stand up.
elapsed. Speakers may be muted. Seeing as that was a speech in the negation, we're now in line for an affirmative speech. Would all affirmative speakers please raise your placards? Representative Pasquarella, you have the floor unopposed.
I thank the chair. Hi, that's Representative Pasquarella speaking for the first time in today's legislative session. Just any indication from, I think, all 4 judges and PO, and I'll be all ready to begin. All right, great. For artists and writers, a blank sheet of paper represents a world of opportunity. But to the Chinese government, it clearly represents something much more malicious. Because back in 2019, 8 protesters in Hong Kong were arrested, simply for going in a public place and holding up blank sheets of paper as a silent protest against the authoritarian government. In our status quo, the US should be the defender of democracy that it promises to be. We should be the defender of the rights of all people everywhere to engage in silent protest. But sadly, we are not. Change that today and pass today's legislation. Let's go through the arguments of the negation to understand why they have the educational and intellectual value of a blank sheet of paper, to understand why you must pass our bill. The 2 main questions that dictate today's round are, will China result in economic retaliation? And can Taiwan successfully be sovereign? First, on the point of economic retaliation, Representative Jiang, in questioning with Representative Baker, says that you need to make sure that Taiwan is strong as an economy before you declare them to be sovereign. If that's true, then now is the time to pass. Hilton Yip, a Taiwanese journalist for the Foreign Policy, in July of 2020 found that since the 1980s, hundreds of thousands of Taiwanese firms moved their businesses into China because of the cheap manufacturing labor there. But now under a new president in Taiwan, they have created a 3-year reshoring plan to attract all of those businesses back to Taiwan. This means 2 very important things. Firstly, Taiwan is already taking steps to become economically sovereign. And second, that China cannot afford to cut off economic trade relations with Taiwan, or they will lose millions of manufacturing jobs. But even if China does retaliate, and I'll take the affirmation at their highest ground here, here's why the US can still step in. Look to Denai Liu from Brookings in November of 2017. He told us that Taiwan's military purchases in the past have boosted American production, economy, and employment in manufacturing states like Pennsylvania, Alabama, Arizona, Florida, and so much more. Representative Dixon, if it is true that Taiwan produces these technological products that so many economies worldwide need, then tell me why the US cannot step in when we pass today to fill in the vacuum that China will leave. But second, will Taiwan successfully remain a sovereign country? Representatives Dixon and Gorin tell you that tensions are currently at their boiling point. But the mistake they make here is misrecognizing tensions as declarations of war. Helang Tan, a foreign policy reporter for CNBC, 2 months ago tells us that China has been promising an attack on Taiwan for years now, but they have never done it. In fact, during COVID-19, when the US was too focused on its own domestic crisis to even look Taiwan in the face, the furthest that China went on attacking Taiwan was simply test firing missiles, which is very different from firing missiles at the country of Taiwan. Representative Dinesh, if you want to undermine the legitimacy of the CCP, then you pass today and finally take a stand against them. When American eyes are focused on Taiwan, you can ensure that China does not retaliate in the way that you think they will. It's time for us to protect the rights of everyone everywhere, to hold up blank sheets of paper. Pass.
Thank you, Representative, for that speech of 3 minutes and 12 seconds. We're now in line for 2 blocks of questioning. Would all questioners please raise your placards? That's going to go to Representative Dixon.
Thank you for recognizing me. Why do you think that China hasn't attacked yet?
They haven't attacked yet because it's essentially mutually assured destruction. The US has a very strong military, and so does
the mystery of whether the United States is going to support Taiwan or not, don't you think that could play a role?
There is no mystery. We have had a mutually, military agreement.
Yeah, there is a mystery because we haven't recognized Taiwan as sovereign yet. But if we take decisive action and show China that we're willing to back Taiwan, won't they have more sense of security?
We've already had an agreement with Taiwan that we
Representative Jiang.
Thank you. So we had to close some businesses when COVID hit, right?
Of course, yeah, everyone
Okay, and
all
that
around
led-
the world had that problem.
And that led to the decline of our economy, right? A
Sure.
recession? Sure. Okay, so if Taiwan currently is facing the same COVID crisis, isn't their economy also crippling?
That's true, but everyone around the world right now is seeing an economic rebound, right? And Taiwan is not exempt from that just because of the COVID crisis.
But aren't they facing a stronger wave than other countries right now?
Not necessarily, and especially with the US backing, we can step in as a trade partner to them to fill up that vacuum.
The question period has elapsed. Speakers may be muted.
I think the chair.
The chair thanks you. Seeing as that was a speech in the affirmation, we are now searching for a negative speech. Would all negative speakers please raise your placards? That is going to go to Representative Sharda.
I thank the PO, the parley, and the judges present today. As usual, I'm at the leisure of those above me. So when you guys are ready, please just go ahead and let me know. And for the information of the chamber, I will be timing myself on my phone on airplane mode just to ensure accuracy. All right. This bill has good theoretical intentions, but simply put, it's a bad idea. According to CNBC, arguably its biggest impact is that this bill is likely to prompt an increase in dangerous disagreements between China and the US, especially as the competition for influence and power in the emerging markets of sub-Saharan Africa and Latin America continues. There will be a temptation for whoever wins in the following years to move closer to Taiwan and even consider formally recognizing its capital. This would have an explosive effect on the US-China relationship and could trigger a full-scale Chinese invasion of the island. Events could then easily spin out of control to a US military response against any Chinese offensive action on Taiwan. Watching out for more actions from the US that could antagonize Beijing, including fresh high-level official visits to Taiwan. Taken together, such actions could convince President Xi that the time has come for more cross-strait military action. In addition to the type of cross-strait warplane incursion since recency, other military actions could take the form of a significant Chinese military exercise in the waters specifically around Taiwan. Representative Baker said that the neg falls flat because Beijing won't retaliate. Let me give you an example. Look at the US arms sales last year when Beijing specifically retaliated against Taiwan when they interacted with the US. Beijing applied increasing pressure on Taiwan to accept China's sovereignty, including flying fighter jets across the sensitive midline of the Taiwanese Strait, which normally serves as an unofficial buffer, responding to the US approval of a potentially $1.8 billion arms sale to Taiwan. Additionally, Representative Dixon accurately pointed out that China is aimed and ready to devastate Taiwan. Representative Wu says that the US recognizing China will allow other countries to follow. But as Representative Dixon also mentioned, nobody is going to follow because no country would risk their economic stability for a simple label. As Representative Dinesh pointed out in Representative Liu's cross-ex, this bill only recognizes our military efforts in Taiwan formally. And Representative Pascarella claims that China won't retaliate because China will face a loss of jobs. An article from April 30th of this year says that many Taiwanese companies have already pulled out of China, and it's highly unlikely that this could hurt China much more than it has already. In short, US diplomatic recognition of Taiwan would have unpredictable and extremely dangerous consequences for both nations, the region, and of course for Taiwan, which would end up as ground zero in this fight. Let's hope domestic politics on both sides does not drive everyone toward that very fraught outcome. The question is which country can sustain and survive from this fallout? And the simple answer is neither. And for those reasons, I would urge all of the representatives here today to fail this bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative, for that speech of 2 minutes and 58 seconds. We are now in line for 2 blocks of questioning. Would all questioners please raise your placards? Right out of the standing, that's going to go to Representative Pascarella.
Hi, Representative. So I agree that Taiwanese firms are voluntarily pulling out of China, but doesn't that mean that they are already showing that they're ready to be sovereign?
No, because like you stated in your speech, China is going to be devastated if they attack Taiwan. Is that correct? That's what you stated in your speech.
I would agree.
So why would this devastate them anymore if Taiwanese companies are already pulling out from China? It's
Because
not
they
going to
still
hurt
have
them at
hundreds
all,
of thousands of companies
bill shouldn't be passed.
They still have hundreds of thousands of companies to lose, right?
But that doesn't necessarily mean
Representative Baker.
Representative, so does the US already have military operations and support in Taiwan?
Yes.
So why is this any different? Why aren't they going to be ready to defend themselves should China unlikely attack?
So, like Representative Dinesh actually outlined in his speech, formally recognizing gives China an excuse to retaliate. And although we have our military action in Taiwan already, that doesn't mean that by simply passing this bill, they're not going to retaliate.
Why haven't they retaliated already since we broke?
The question period has elapsed. Speakers may be muted. Seeing as that was a speech in negation, we are now searching for an affirmation speech. Would all affirmative speakers please raise your placards? Once again, would all affirmative speakers please raise your placards? Although the chair heavily frowns upon one-sided debate, seeing no affirmative speakers, are there any negative speakers in the chamber? Representative Barrow, you have the floor unopposed.
I thank the chair. Hey, everybody, that's Representative Barrow, spelled B-A-R-R-A-U. I'm going to go ahead and pin the PO. So I'm just going to wait a couple seconds and verbally stop me if you aren't ready. Okay, perfect. In every debate, no matter what ideology you're standing against or what institution you're standing for, it all comes down to what you're fighting for. The affirmation has chosen to fight for fantasy and fallacy, and I'm here to defend what is left of reality. Fail this legislation. Now, Representative Noonan champions the affirmative by discussing the importance of standing up against China's abuses within the region, and I completely agree. But understand that the approach of today's legislation goes against the will of the Taiwanese people, the most important and yet most neglected factor in today's round. See, most Taiwanese people definitely want to distance themselves from China, but that does not mean that they're fighting on the front lines demanding independence. In fact, the diplomat found on May 29, 2020, that in regards to the country's political status, most Taiwanese people want a continuation of the status quo. So Representative Wu claims that Taiwan is globally isolated. However, despite their lack of sovereignty, Taiwan has still been able to participate on the global stage, further pushing the Taiwanese aversion to sovereignty. The Council of Foreign Relations tells us last month that Taiwan is already a part of over 40 international organizations. And even with Chinese control of the World Health Organization and the United Nations stipulations, independence under this bill wouldn't allow them to join either one of those organizations. So when Representative Baker tells you about the exclusion of Taiwan from organizations like the WHO and United Nations, understand nothing under this legislation or our recognition guarantees that outcome. The only guarantee is that we disregard the will of the people. You have to fail today's legislation. This bill doesn't defend democracy. It delivers devastation. Fail this bill because it destroys economic opportunity in Taiwan. Now, Representative Zhang told you how China is Taiwan's #1 partner, but Representative Pascarella counters this by mentioning the steps that Taiwan's taking to become more economically independent. Well, Representative Pascarella, replacing China is easier said than done in Taiwan's economy. And let's look to how important China is to Taiwan. See, first, Taiwan's entire economy is heavily dependent on China, with Reuters telling us in April 2017 that 40% of Taiwanese exports go to China. If this bill even threatens to cut that string, that cuts the lifeline of millions who are desperately clinging on. But courts takes that one step further in December 2016, when they find that foreign direct investment from China into Taiwan exceeds $10 billion in that year alone, more than triple the amount in 1993, signaling the extended reliance that Taiwan has on China. Without both of these things, Taiwan's economy is put on the brink of collapse, but you don't even need aggressive action from China to destroy Taiwan. Taiwanese independence makes Taiwan even less lucrative for investment and expansions because it no longer serves as an access point to the larger Chinese economy. Representative Liu is concerned about the geopolitical power that ensues if Taiwan falls. We should all be concerned, but his impacts only occur in an affirmative world. An economically crippled Taiwan cannot stand. Representative Noon, Representative Wu, Representative Liu, and all of the rest of the negation understand when you pass today's legislation, you only doom the people of Taiwan. We have to fail.
Thank you, Representative, for that speech of 3 minutes and 9 seconds. We are now in line for 2 blocks of questioning. Would all questioners please raise their placards? All right, that is first going to go to Representative Liu.
Hi, Representative. Why does Taiwan feel the need to arm themselves against China?
Well, obviously, they feel like they're under threat from China.
Exactly. They feel like they're going to be invaded and China will just take over. Why isn't it important for the US to protect that?
I didn't get an opportunity to get to it, but the United States is still capable of helping to arm Taiwan, but understanding that the Taiwanese people—
I told you that we have no military capability of
as I
defending
found—
Taiwan.
understanding that the United States doesn't need to recognize that Taiwan is sovereign in order to support them
Why?
militarily. Those two things aren't mutually exclusive.
But we have no way of
protecting
protecting them right now.
Thank you, Representative. So you cited an article from 2017 stating that 40% of Taiwanese companies are in China. Is that correct?
In 2017, yes.
So in 2021, an article from 2021 specifically states that many of these Taiwanese companies have pulled out. So how does that affect on both the Taiwanese and Chinese economy chain?
Regardless of whether or not they're moving towards more economic independence, which I recognize what Representative Pasquarello is saying. However, you have to understand that the United States can't fill that gap fast enough for Taiwan to avoid economic collapse. When you
Question period has elapsed. Speakers may be muted.
Motion.
Representative Dixon.
Motion to move to previous question.
Is there a second? All right, seeing no objections and assuming unanimous consent, we will now move to the previous question on our first bill, the Taiwanese bill. All right. All those who wish to pass today's piece of legislation, please raise your placard and only lower it once I call your name. I read Representative Baker, Representative Wu, Representative Liu, Representative Noonan, and Representative Pasquarello. All those who wish to fail today's piece of legislation, please raise your placards. Representative Barreau, Representative Gorin, Representative Dinesh, Representative Jiang, Representative Dixon, and Representative Sharda. I do believe that is everyone. So on a vote of 5 to 6, this bill does fail. My apologies to our sponsor, Representative Noonan. Representative Barreau.
Seeing a natural break in debate, I move for a 5-minute recess.
Is there a second? All right, seeing unanimous consent and hearing no objections, we will now move for a 5-minute recess. Please return at 5 minutes past the hour wherever you are.
Before we all go, can we get the split again just for the next bill so we all know what we're doing?
We need some negation speakers on Africa.
So
okay, so
everyone
just
who
ask.
listed-
One second.
If
I just want to.
Oh,
Yeah, go ahead.
why don't we go ahead and do it the last 30 seconds of the recess, because then everyone will come back on and then we can go ahead and get splits then.
I think that if we do it now, though, then people will know if they have to prep an egg. And if they don't know that now, then we won't have that 5 minutes and we'll have like that awkward silence at the beginning.
No one's here though.
Could ask them to come back.
All right, we do have about 30 seconds left in our recess, so if everyone could please start making their way back.
Let's go ahead and get splits if everyone can get back. If not, we'll just go ahead and I'm going to request to extend the recess by an extra like 30 seconds if that's the case. Okay. Everyone who wishes to speak on the, is anyone else here? Okay. Everyone who wishes to speak on the affirmation of Africa, please raise your hand or your placard. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, on the negation of Africa. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, 5. So we're pretty evenly split for that one.
Okay, and with that, our recess has elapsed, and I do believe everyone is back. I did see that Pascarella had their camera on just a second ago, so I'm going to assume that they're back. Okay. With that, we are going to move into debate on our next bill, which is a bill to fund internet access in Africa to support sustainable economic development. Do we have an author present? Representative Dixon, you have the floor unopposed.
Thank you. This is Representative Dixon speaking for the second time this legislative session. Once again, that's Dixon, and as always, I'm at the leisure of everyone above me. So just give me a verbal sign if you're not ready, and then a thumbs up for my PO would be great. All right, then let's get started. When standing front of a similar chamber, Governor Morris said, "I anticipate the day when to command respect in the remotest regions, it will be sufficient to say, I am an American." To accomplish this goal today, I urge you all to pass a bill that creates real change, and I am proud to author this bill. The World Bank report in 2019 states that the regional average broadband penetration, including 3G and 4G connections, is only 25% in rural Africa. We can see that the working age population in Africa is expected to increase by some 450 million people between 2015 and 2035. If current trends continue, less than a quarter will find stable jobs. Achieving universal, affordable, and good quality internet access by 2030 will require an investment of $100 billion, and this bill effectively accomplishes half that goal. A Deloitte study in 2014 states that if internet penetration rates in developing countries were raised to those of developed countries, the resulting economic activity could generate $2.2 trillion in additional GDP and more than 140 million new jobs. The Institute for Global Change in March of 2021 also reported that the arrival of fast internet in Africa has yielded an estimated increase of between 7 and 13% of jobs, regardless of education level. This statistic does not represent the formalization of existing jobs, but the creation of new and better quality jobs, with fewer workers holding jobs in unskilled occupations. IMF in March 2020 also reported that income inequality and inequality of opportunity decreases as we invest in Africa because of the existing disparity between men and women in the labor force. That's the problem we've identified, and so is Brookings Institute of March 2021, that without affordable internet and reliable power, broadband internet access remains out of reach for many low-income Africans living in rural areas. Their existing measures they're taking is not solving for that, and thus we're seeing even more inequality. Next, let's move on to the fact that the time to act is now, and we have a unique potential to do so. The CFR in January of 2021 says that Africa needs at least 1.6 billion doses of the vaccine to meet its 60% vaccination target. China is responding to this by what East Asia Forum in April of this year has called vaccine diplomacy, saying that Chinese COVID-19 vaccines have been shipped to more than 80 countries for market or emergency use. Among them, 53 countries required vaccine for free, one of these being the countries within 40 countries within Africa. Right now, we can see that China is investing not only in the vaccines in Africa, but also in widespread internet. Foreign direct investment from China has grown 40% annually. We can see that right now, we need to solidify our relationship with Africa, and the only way to do that is going to be to develop and invest in their internet. That is going to create real change for workers and real change for democracy. Thus, I urge you all to join me in strong affirmation today. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative, for that speech of 3 minutes and 9 seconds. We are now in line for 4 blocks of questioning or 2 full minutes. Would all questioners please raise their placards? All right, that goes to Representative Noonan.
All right, so who does this bill partner with to achieve its goals?
We're partnering with the African Union.
Right.
in
Is the African Union been typically seen as a competent organization?
I've seen that with us working unilaterally with them, we can create real broadband internet change.
Sure, but isn't the goal to make sure that Africa can be dependent without our aid eventually?
Yeah, of course, we're going to want them to become independent, but the reason that we're interfering in the first place is so we can make sure the broadband internet is going to the right places.
Sure, but if we're going to interfere, shouldn't we do so with a competent body?
Well, if you have any other
Representative Wu.
Thanks. So what incentive or reason do African nations have to shift over to our aid or our support if you contextualize yourself that there is Chinese infrastructure on the ground right now?
Well, we've already been seeing a global stigma raised against China, but when it's the only option, we can see that African nations are going to be willing to accept that. Right now in Africa, a lot of the countries aren't accepting vaccine aid because they're skeptical of China's vaccines. If they have another option for broadband internet, which they'll still
Representative Pascarella.
When authoritarian regimes get control of the internet, how do they normally use it?
Censorship.
Right. So if you're giving African dictators this control of broadband media, doesn't that allow them to more easily manipulate the public?
I don't see any widespread examples of African dictators who are going to be able to do this, especially when we're implementing this process alongside Africa to make sure it's done in a
There's a major trend in Africa of banning social media apps that are like allowing for activism.
Yeah, that's the problem with allowing nations like China to do this instead. It's going to get there one way or another. Let's make sure we do it in a democratic way.
Okay, so our FCC defines quality internet as speeds over 25 megabits per second, right?
Sure.
Yes, they do. So why are we giving them quality broadband internet? How is it quality if it's only 10 megabits per second for Africa?
Well, I'd say any help we can give them is better than nothing. We can always build off of that infrastructure. We're setting a foundation.
But aren't other countries and other companies already setting the foundation?
I mean, yes, but if we're going to do it in a more effective way, we need to be able to solidify relations with Africa, and by doing
question
it,
period has elapsed.
Thank you.
The chair thanks you. Speakers may be muted. A couple of things to say. First of all, remember to keep your questions and answers short, just so we can get some good back and forth, and just so we don't have that interruption, because your judges can't score you if they can't hear you. Second of all, our parley did send a little note to the judges / point recorders in the chat, so just make sure to check that out. Seeing as that was our authorship speech, we are now in line for a first negative speech. Would all negative speakers please raise their placards? Once again, would all negative speakers please raise your placards? Representative Noonan, thank you for stepping up.
I thank the chair. My name is Representative Noonan, speaking for the second time this legislative session. Just give me 1 second. Is anybody not ready? Perfect. Then I will begin. It should come as no surprise to this chamber that the U.S. has a long history of imperialism. We have gone into countries, told them we are Americans and we know best. Unfortunately, this bill continues that legacy. Even though I believe that Representative Dixon has the best interests in heart, I believe we must negate today because U.S. aid inherently causes harm and because this bill supports oppressive regimes. First, foreign aid, especially U.S. aid, can be an inherent harm. According to Keenan Malik for The Guardian in September 2018, half of all international development aid is tied, meaning that recipient countries must use it to buy services and goods from the donor nation, benefiting their economy. The actual U.S. aid website said until 2006, when it became too embarrassing and was taken down, the principal beneficiary of America's foreign assistance programs has always been the United States. Close to 80% of the U.S. Agency for International Development's contracts and grants go directly to American firms. It's no wonder then that according to Tom Dichter, an anthropologist with more than 50 years of experience in foreign aid, that dependency has been one of the few tangible results of the trillions we have spent. We are going into these countries through U.S. aid and we are crippling them. We are dooming them to be dependent on us. Representative Dixon says she wants Africa to become dependent, but when you do it through US aid, that's just never going to happen. And we look at past president and we see that dependence has not occurred. If we want to achieve true development, like what Representative Dixon clearly cares about, it is imperative that we negate and allow Africa to become dependent. Even if you think foreign aid can be beneficial, it most certainly cannot be through US aid because of their inherent corruption. Therefore, you negate. But second, even if you ignore all of the negative impacts that US aid has, you cannot ignore the negative impact of where that money is going. The African Union, with whom we are cooperating and giving billions of dollars, is a failure of an institution. According to Jor B. and Itieri for foreign policy in July 2016. Not surprisingly, the AU has achieved spectacularly little in its decade and a half of existence. The body has yet to solve a single conflict diplomatically. The AU has proved equally inept on the economic front. Moreover, according to Tafi Makah for Al Jazeera in June 2018, the AU boasts leaders within its ranks who have profoundly patriarchal and conservative values, questionable legitimacy, and blood-spattered pasts. So not only will you see a waste of billions of dollars, you will be supporting an inherently corrupt institution that includes members that oppress their people. Trusting the development of internet with corrupt leaders could be disastrous. As Representative Pascarilla alluded to in questioning, you're going to be seeing that internet possibly be used to oppress the people where these leaders are ruling. As we can see, not only is US aid going to be extremely harmful in causing dependency, we're also giving it to a corrupt organization. I care about the people of Africa, and that is why I'm negating today.
Thank you, Representative, for that speech of 3 minutes and 9 seconds. We are now in line for 4 blocks or 2 full minutes of question. Would all questioners please raise your placards? All right, out of the standing, that does go to Representative Barreau.
Hey, Representative. So let's just say we fail today's legislation because of the points you just made. Who fills the void if the United States doesn't?
I think that it is possible that China could do that, but I think that there's other ways to prevent China from encroaching than just doing what China is doing. I'm sorry?
If China's already pointing its focus towards these African countries, doing the same exact thing today's legislation does and exacting their types of leverage in the region, how do we stop that?
I think that the way we don't stop that is just by doing the exact same thing they're doing. There has to be a better
to have our own leverage than theirs.
Representative Gorin.
Hi, Representative. So does the United States have the Congress have the power to audit?
I'm sure they do.
Right, exactly. So why exactly can't we just withdraw funds if they are not being used properly? Like, what's stopping us from doing that?
I mean, I'm sure we can do that, but that still raises the question, we are creating dependency in Africa.
Okay, why is dependency on the US uniquely bad when Africa's already dependent on China? Like, why isn't dependence on China worse?
Because we're just encroaching that, and we are making them dependent.
China's encroaching.
Okay.
Representative Dixon.
Going up that line of questioning, if we're letting an authoritarian regime implement this system instead, how is that going to benefit Africa?
We don't have to let an authoritarian regime. The only option we have is not just to encroach on our own platforms.
Okay, and is China making any effort to work with the African government?
I'm sure that they're trying to work with the African government.
The answer is that they're not. So if we're letting an authoritarian regime do this for their own benefit while we are trying to create an actual system, how is the current system benefiting Africa more?
Because basically,
Representative Liu.
Hi, Representative. If right now these governments are already like censoring internet, what changes under today's legislation?
We're supporting them doing that. That's what.
Why are we supporting them when we're just trying to expand access to non-corrupt countries?
Giving them all of this money, and we're explicitly supporting the African Union, which includes these people who are oppressing their people.
No, we're not. What if we're supporting the countries that don't? And I don't understand why we can't just
Then why
have a
is it
condition.
And if you want to support the countries, then don't support the African Union.
That doesn't make sense at all.
The question period has elapsed. Speakers may be muted. Seeing as that was a speech in the negation, we are now searching for an affirmative speaker. Would all affirmative speakers please raise your placards? All right, out of those standing, that does go to Representative Gorin.
I thank the chair for the judge's reference. My name is Representative Gorin, spelled Gorin, and I'm speaking for the second time in this session, this time on the affirmation. When everyone's ready, can I please get a smile, nod, or some indication? Lovely. He who does not seize opportunity today will be unable to seize tomorrow's opportunity. And since today's legislation is a great opportunity, we must heed the African proverb, seize it and affirm. First, passing today's legislation boosts the economy by creating jobs. That's because Section 1 of today's legislation grants a total of $49.5 billion over the next decade for funding research and development to expand access of quality broadband internet in Africa. The Council on Foreign Relations reports on July 25th of 2019 that only 40% of Africa has access to the internet, which is why there's a huge opportunity for investment. And the International Finance Cooperation tells us this year that the African Union plans to create complete coverage by 2030. Senator Zhang, some coverage is better than no coverage. Senator Noonan, today's legislation is mutually beneficial to both Africa and the US, because even if we're creating jobs through the United States, that's always a good thing. And then we're enabling access for the internet for Africa. That's a good thing for them as well. That's a win-win scenario. The Senator Dixon impacts to jobs, but let me further quantify this, because Speed Matter reports just this year in a study that for every $5 billion invested in broadband, 250,000 jobs are created. Today's legislation would create over 2.47 million jobs across the next decade, enabling people to pay for food and for a roof over their head, while improving technology and expanding internet access and global connectivity. That's always a good thing. Next, passing today's legislation undercuts China's influence by fortifying our regional hegemony. The Senator Noonan is worried about dependence, but dependence on the US is always better than dependence on an authoritarian country like China, because China is the leader of censorship across the entire world. But when the United States works directly in conjunction with the African Union, we have the power of the purse. We actually have more influence, and we can ensure that the internet won't be censored that way. The African report tells us on November 24th of 2020 that China's trade with Africa has increased to 19.7% compared to 12% with the rest of the world. The Center for Strategic and International Studies and the Observer Research Foundation reports on August 24th of 2020 that 49 out of the 54 countries, including the African Union, has already signed the Memorandum of Understanding for the Belt and Road Initiative, or the BRI, as they seek to modernize and expand infrastructure, with China providing them loans. The same article further explains that this memorandum is not legally binding, but formalizes and acknowledges China's investments in the country. But why exactly is Chinese expansionism through the BRI so dangerous? Because Foreign Affairs and International Relations tells us on April 3rd of 2020 that China's been using the BRI to expand their military and authoritarian agenda through implementing and expanding surveillance equipment. But passing limits China's ability to control and dominate the world. In cross-examination, Senator Wu asks why countries in Africa would take our investments over Chinese loans. Let me answer. Because our investments are made in good faith. The Council on Foreign Relations reports on March of 2021 that the BRI is especially detrimental to U.S. economic trade policies and the countries who fail to pay back their loans because of China's debt trap diplomacy. Why is now the best time? Because the African report tells us on January 4th of 2021 that amidst the pandemic, China has reduced investment in Africa to address domestic matters. Senators, now is our chance to see the opportunity today so we can seize tomorrow's.
Thank you, Representative, for that speech of 3 minutes and 9 seconds. We are now on line for 1 minute of question. Would all questioners please raise your placards? All right, that does go to Representative Wu unopposed.
Thanks. In the context of internet infrastructure, is China providing money and aid, or are they providing like actual help to building infrastructure?
Right, so they're providing loans to go ahead and like build infrastructure, and that does include the internet.
Don't Chinese private firms literally go into Africa and help African governments set up physical technology as opposed to just funding them with loans?
Yeah, sure, but loans is like a major concern, and especially since today's legislation is providing money through.
Why would they prefer U.S. aid as opposed to Chinese like intervention? And
Are there any further questions? Representative Noonan.
Okay, so why is trying to beat China at their own game better than just directly putting pressure on China to stop their imperialistic actions?
Okay, considering the fact that we've been trying for the longest time to try to keep China in check, and we have not been succeeding because they are a huge threat and they're continuing to do what they do, we've been failing on that front. We need to go ahead and amp up the ante on that.
So you think that the best possible solution for everybody is to just do what China is doing, but with us?
No, because we are not an authoritarian country. We don't believe in censorship, but when we promote our values and influence—
The question period has elapsed. Speakers may be muted.
I thank the chair.
Chair thanks you. Seeing as that was a speech in the affirmation, we are now seeking a negative speaker. Would all negative speakers please raise your placards? All right. That goes to Representative Jiang.
Thank you. This is Representative Jiang for the second time today. If anyone's not ready, please let me know. I'll give it a few seconds and then get started. Okay, awesome. Benjamin Franklin once said, "If better is possible, good is not enough." This bill And the affirmation's intentions, I'd say, are good. I appreciate the effort in trying to help Africa expand their much needed internet, but better is possible, and it doesn't happen when you pass. Fail this legislation for two reasons. First, because this bill isn't the improvement that Africa needs. And second, because we can make a bigger impact in digital skills training. The first reason why you fail is because this legislation isn't the improvement that Africa desperately needs. This bill defines quality broadband internet as internet with a download speed of 10 megabits per second. Representative Dixon, as you admitted in questioning, that's far from quality. Telecom Review Africa wrote on February 25th of last year that on average, one email with attachments takes up about 15 megabits per second of internet. File sharing takes about 5, but Representative Dixon and Gorin say it's still better than the status quo. You tell me if a few emails and light internet browsing means that Africa can magically catch up to the rest of the world when the rest of the world is able to do much heavier work on technology. My opponents are focusing on countering China when really they should be standing up for the African people. If our money isn't spent toward quality, we shouldn't be spending it at all. Another reason why you fail is because we can make a bigger impact in digital skills training. First of all, censorship and dependence shouldn't be a reason to fail. The people of Africa desperately need internet access, so what should be a reason to fail is redundancy and better policy. The World Bank writes on October 17th of 2019 that the private sector has driven the most successful broadband initiatives in Africa, but public agencies can also play a crucial role by implementing effective regulation and more. American companies have already been working both together and with international organizations to help expand access to internet in Africa. Any investment strictly in internet like this legislation when it already exists is a waste. But we don't have to just be involved in regulation, because according to the World Economic Forum on October 22nd of last year, actual use of the internet is limited by high prices for data, lack of basic literacy, and limited availability of content and languages. So, Representative Dixon, sure, jobs are created, but what's the point of having internet if you don't know what to do with it? Leave the expansion to private companies and international organizations. Our biggest impact can either be in training or regulation. So, overall, let me get this straight. We're investing a few $billions a year for slow internet that won't even truly improve Africa. If my opponents truly cared like they say they do, they wouldn't be tossing slow internet at Africa as a so-called solution. We aren't paying enough, we aren't working enough, and we aren't doing enough. I will not accept good enough as a solution.
Thank you, Representative, for that speech of 3 minutes and 7 seconds. We're now in line for 1 minute of questioning. Would all questioners please raise their placards? All right, that is going to go to Representative Sharda.
Thank you, Representative. So at the end of your speech, you mentioned that we simply aren't doing enough. So
Right.
what exactly is the net harm of this piece of legislation?
Okay, we're wasting money when we could be spending it in better places.
How are we wasting money when we're investing in Africa's internet access?
Because the internet we're giving in this bill is slow.
That's still better than no internet, isn't it?
But private companies and international
No, but the
organizations, as I
answer
said
is
in my
yes.
speech,
So
are
then
already.
what's the net harm? Why shouldn't we pass this
The
legislation?
answer isn't yes, because we're wasting money. We don't have unlimited funds. To pay
Representative
for Africa.
Burrow.
Hey, Representative. So let's
Hello.
talk about these private companies. What
Okay.
determines their stake in African internet?
I'm assuming if they can benefit from it, that would be a
Exactly.
good thing
So
for
what
them.
happens when that benefit is gone?
That's why they're working with international organizations as
But
well.
what happens when
These
that
companies who have already invested in Africa already have seen the benefits.
You didn't answer my question. What happens when that benefit is gone?
The benefit isn't going to disappear because they're
In the
still
long term,
building in
if they
Africa.
can no longer benefit from this African internet, will they leave the region?
They're not going to leave the region if they continue to benefit from
Question
African
period
use of
has
internet.
elapsed. Speakers may be muted. Speech and mitigation, we are now seeking an affirmative speech. Would all affirmative speakers please? All right, that does go to Representative Liu. Yes, Representative Liu.
I thank the president. Hello, everybody. It's Representative Liu again. Again, that's LUU for all of the judges out there. Once again, a smile, nod, a virtual thumbs up would be amazing to show me that you're ready. Thank you. Amazing, wonderful, beautiful. All right. We can start. In this chamber, we often like to throw around the saying, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. But actions speak louder than words. And time again, whenever injustice occurs anywhere besides America, we act as if it isn't our problem to solve. Today, our job is quite easy. I'm asking this Congress to write a check before the world pays the price. You affirm to protect democracy in Africa. Representative Jiang, this debate isn't about whether or not our interests should be established in Africa, but rather who should be providing funds to establish internet. Here's why the answer needs to be the United States. Right now, internet is being expanded in Africa, but at a major cost. The Atlantic Council explains in April of this year that China has been investing billions of dollars into establishing networks in 30 different African countries. But has this aid actually been effective? Honestly, it's been a bit too effective, because Foreign Policy explains in March of 2019 that Chinese telecom company Huawei built and operates 70% of Africa's 4G networks. But why is that a problem? They explain that Huawei's infrastructure contains backdoors that gives China access to any data transferred on their network in order to spy on other countries. Not only that, but China has also been using its influence to ensure that African governments follow their lead on internet control and restrict the free flow of information online. Internet access is coming at the price of intrusion and suppression. But unfortunately, Africa's need for internet is so desperate, that's the price that they're willing to pay. Fortunately, this bill allows us to step in. The World Bank writes in October of 2019 that making high-quality, affordable internet access universal across Africa by 2030 would still require an investment of $100 billion. Section 1 of this bill covers half that cost. And Representative Wu, that sets up a clear and obvious choice for African leaders. Be subject to the abuses of China's agenda, or enjoy the freedom of an American one. It's simple. We have to intervene. But why is intervention so important? Crucially, it empowers the people. A 14-year meta-analysis of 117 different countries conducted by the Scientific Electronic Library found that a 28% increase in internet usage on average leads to 26% reduction in government corruption and a 56% increase in voice and accountability. With the internet, people have access to information they otherwise wouldn't have, increasing government transparency. With this bill, you empower the people, enable democracy. And Representative Noonan, this is especially crucial when you consider the alternative. With a negation victory, you allow China to expand their networks and embolden corruption. Actions speak louder than words. And when it comes to the internet crisis in Africa, we've been silent. Today, we have the obligation to speak up and ensure that the citizens of Africa can do so as well. Fulfill that obligation and affirm this legislation.
Thank you, Representative, for that speech of 3 minutes and 7 seconds. We're now in line for 1 minute of questioning. Would all questioners please raise your placards? Right, that's going to go to Representative Baker.
Representative, so what does the internet access do to create more democracies in Africa?
Yeah, as I told you, because the people have more access to internet, they're more easily able to spread around their ideas and rally together as a people who have an identity.
Of course, but previous speakers have spoken on the fact that African countries are already very susceptible to corruption and censorship. So why wouldn't they continue to just feed their people propaganda?
What's the beauty about this internet is it actually increases government accountability by being able to call out the government. But even if you think that doesn't work, we can add stipulations that make sure that government corruption doesn't restrict the internet.
Thank you. So China already has substantial investment, like companies like Huawei in Africa, right?
Yeah, they forcefully place companies in Africa.
Okay, so it's leading to increased access to internet, which is pretty much the goal of this bill.
Right? I wouldn't say that it's even free internet because almost all opinion is just suppressed by a government.
But people are being able to access the internet, right?
It's at a cost of their freedom and identity. I'd argue that the United States can actually provide that. That's something that China is literally taking away from them. We should be giving them freedom to use the internet.
The question period has elapsed. Speakers may be muted. Seeing as that was a speech in the affirmation, we are now seeking a negative speech. Would all negative speakers please raise your placards? That does go to Representative Baker unopposed.
I thank the chair. For the judges, that is Representative Baker, spelled like the profession, for the second time this legislative session. I'm always at the leisure of all those above me, so I'll begin in just a few moments if that's all right with everyone. Cool. Today's bill is kind of like Swiss cheese. It looks appetizing at first, but it may be filled with more holes than you anticipated. Because while I agree we should be funding some kind of internet access in Africa, we want to be sure we're going to do this job right and create the real change that the affirmation wants and not create more problems that we solve. So let's begin. When Representative Dixon is correct when she stresses how much of Africa needs aid, yet fails to elaborate on what that means for the finances of this bill. The World Bank reports in 2019 that across Africa, where less than a third of the population has access to broadband connectivity, achieving universal, affordable, and good quality internet access by 2030 will require an investment of $100 billion in US currency. This bill will be enacted in 2022, which gives us only 10 years before the international community wants full access to the internet in Africa, like Representative Barreau states. However, in 8 years, the United States will only have invested $41 billion into African internet infrastructure. This isn't even half of the projected cost of allowing full internet access in African countries. Hafez Ghanem, the World Bank's vice president for the African region, states, "Let us be clear, no single actor will be able to meet Africa's 2030 budget and carry the burden of $100 billion of funding alone. All stakeholders must work together to make sure every African has affordable and reliable access to the internet. Yet the affirmation is invested in going in it alone without the required money." And Representative Noonan is correct that our investments only fund the political corruption and censorship that they proved. And when there's only 17 democracies in Africa as it stands, I fear we don't stand to protect freedom like Representative Liu claims, only empowering dictators to display propaganda. And while I too would like stipulations, this bill contains none. Now let's look into what foreign aid like this does to developing nations. Allow me to counter Representative Liu's claims that we empower the people by stating that foreign aid like this hurts the economies and thus the people of developing nations, especially since this legislation does not say how the internet will be established in African countries. The World Economic Forum in 2015 says that foreign aid has been connected to low economic growth in recipient countries. By trying to help poor people in developing nations, the rich world may actually be corrupting these nations' governments and slowing their growth. Further, what no one has yet to address is the internal corruption with the overseer of our own legislation, the Agency of International Developments. The Guardian in 2018 reports half of all internal development aid is tied, meaning that recipient countries must use it to buy services and goods from the donor nation, benefiting their economy. The actual USA website said until 2006, when it became too embarrassing and they had to take down, that the principal beneficiary of American foreign assistance programs have always been the United States, and close to 80% of the US Agency for International Development contracts go directly to American firms, because foreign aid is used to promote American interests before it is used to actually help the African people. So you will fail today's legislation. To do this job and do it right, and don't let the African people fall through these Swiss cheese legislation's holes.
Thank you, Representative, for that speech of 3 minutes exactly. We are now in line for 1 minute of questioning. Would all questions please raise your placards? All right, that goes to Representative Dinesh.
Hi, Representative. You talked about how foreign aid might decrease the economies of some countries that receive them. How big exactly was this effect?
So this kind of effect is especially seen across Africa, as many American investments in Africa did fail and lead to just corruption.
My question exactly is, how much did their economies decrease from foreign aid?
So this website only went into a general statement. However, there are specifics in especially African countries that we developed in that only increased political corruption and empowered the government as opposed to the people.
Representative Gorin.
Why is it bad to bring jobs to the US?
This isn't bringing jobs exactly to the US. Nowhere in this legislation does it cite that we're using American work.
Right. So you just told me in your speech that it requires purchase of American products, which means we're boosting the American economy. Why is that a bad thing?
It only has American products. We already have these products, but it doesn't create these jobs. We're not establishing it here. It takes people to invest. It takes people to create it in Africa, but this says nowhere that we're using American jobs or African jobs.
Okay,
this bill is too vague.
Okay, so every time we invest in our country—
Question period has elapsed. Speakers may be muted. Seeing as that was a speech in negation, we are now seeking an affirmative speech. Would all affirmative speakers please raise your placards? All right, that goes to Representative Dinesh.
I thank the chair. For reference of the judges, my name is Representative Dinesh, speaking for the second time in today's session. All right, is anybody not ready for me to begin? Okay. This Congress has a duty to preserve the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. But our responsibility isn't just to preserve those rights to those who live within our borders. We have a moral responsibility to extend those rights to the poor, the tired, the huddled masses yearning to breathe free, as our very own Statue of Liberty says. Today, we get the opportunity to do that. Pass. Now, before I get into the benefits of this bill, let me just take a moment to point out how all the negation's concerns are relevant. Now, Representatives Young and Baker, I sympathize with your concern that we're not providing high-quality internet. But everyone in this chamber can agree that moderate quality internet is better than none at all, especially after Representative Dixon pointed out the millions of jobs it creates. And Representative Noonan, I once again understand your concerns with corruption and autocracy, but as Representative Liu eloquently pointed out, accessible internet has fomented decrease in corruption and increases in democracy wherever we've done it. Moreover, the African Union is also implementing anti-corruption measures. And the final negation concern, that of African dependency on the US, is moot. Representative Baker, this isn't your usual blank check of foreign aid. We're creating many more jobs than we lose, as Representative Dixon pointed out. Moreover, how does building broadband towers in Africa somehow hurt their economies? There isn't a very clear line drawn between the two. We must pass this bill for the millions who don't have access to affordable healthcare in Africa. Right now, healthcare in Africa is so expensive that tens of millions of people are pushed into poverty in an attempt to pay for those costs, according to the World Health Organization. But with the rapid expansion of telehealth, which is the remote treatment of patients over the internet, more and more Africans are getting affordable health. According to the National Institutes of Health, 40% of people in Africa still live in rural locations, and telemedicine is their only chance of medical care. That's hundreds of millions of people who will receive medical care when we pass because of the expansion of broadband. But why is that so important? Well, in Kenya, implementing telehealth led to ultrasounds for 100,000 people. And that's a huge deal because in rural Africa, the World Health Organization reports that over 700 mothers die of pregnancy-related causes every day. That's 252,000 per year, representatives. When we expand broadband for half of Africa, as Representative Dixon explained in her studies, we finally delivered the most basic medical care to the people who need it the most. The World Health Organization went on to find that at least 2/3 of mothers and children can be saved with broadband and telehealth expansion. These are preventable causes, and the way we prevent them is by passing today. And when 1.16 million newborns die in sub-Saharan Africa every year, it's time that this Congress takes action. We're able to save hundreds of thousands of lives by passing today. That alone trumps any downside the negation has pointed out. Slight increases in tensions with China must take a backseat to literally saving lives. When the harms happen on another continent, it's a lot easier to reduce the need for urgency. But just because they're not our constituents doesn't mean their problems don't matter. We must pass.
Thank you, Representative, for that speech of 3 minutes and 3 seconds. We are now in line for 1 minute of questioning. Would all questioners please raise your placards? Right, of those standing, that goes to Representative Noonan.
Okay, so you said that the AU is creating anti-corruption measures. So they're creating these measures for themselves?
No, they're just generally decreasing corruption within governments.
Okay, but how can that be working when there's literally corrupt members of the African Union?
I'll agree with you, Representative, that there are corrupt members of the African Union, but we have to look at the long-term consequences. When we implement internet, we increase public oversight of the government, which has been shown to decrease corruption in the long term, as Representative Liu pointed out.
If we're even going to do that, shouldn't we do that through a body that isn't known to be corrupt?
If you have any alternatives.
Thank you, Representative. So you outlined in your speech the concern of birth rights. Is that correct?
Like pregnancy-related deaths in mothers in Africa.
So can you outline the exact transition or process by which this bill will aid that problem?
Well, so there are already a lot of telehealth services in Africa. Lumify is by far the biggest one. But for them to actually deliver their telehealth services, they need broadband because that's how you do remote patient treatment.
Question period has lapsed. Speakers may be muted. Just a quick note to the chamber, we do have about 30 minutes left until our hard stop in case that changes your strategy or when you want to speak. That was a speaker. We are now at negative speaker. Please raise your placards. All right, that goes to Representative Wu unopposed.
Thank you. Hey everyone, Representative Zach Wu, second time today. This time I'm on the negation. My last name is still spelled W-U. Any indication when you guys are ready, I'm happy to begin. Good, 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 good. And then PO, awesome. Just grab a timer. In the song Africa by Toto, the line before the celebrated chorus goes, "Hurry boy, it's waiting there for you." This house has quite possibly taken those words too seriously, eagerly approaching the continent of Africa as a waterfront of economic opportunity. To the viewers watching at home on C-SPAN, I am sorry that when you turn on the TV, you see your Congress giddy on the edge of their proverbial seats, ready to pounce at any opportunity to extract value from Africa. But take a step back, and you'll find multiple reasons to be very skeptical about how pronounced the impacts touted by the affirmative can be. Evaluate this debate on two C's, censorship and China. How first, the censorship carried out by African governments, and second, deeply rooted Chinese influence reverse every single affirmative impact about accessibility, information, and democracy. First, multiple speakers on my side have speculated about the nature of censorship. None of them have really gotten right its implication. Christopher Giles of BBC reports this January that cases of internet shutdowns in Africa have been rising, with Tanzania, Ethiopia, Zimbabwe, Burundi, Chad, and Mali all engaging in shutdowns at some point in the last year during national elections or civil unrest. In the status quo, states get to coerce providers into blacklisting certain URLs. Insofar as those problems persist in an affirmative world, it does not matter how much technology you research and develop. The basic right to information is still being systematically denied. So, Representative Liu, while your speech about freedom is admirable, even inspiring, it isn't real. The issue with this bill is that you are essentially handing Africa a yearly blank check with zero conditions on its use. Please read the mechanism of this bill. You are funding research and development, not infrastructure. At best, this is symbolic. At worst, it emboldens censorship. That doesn't change just because Uncle Sam gets involved. But it's also important to ask what has enabled this endemic censorship to take place. Specifically, it's because of Chinese supply factors that have been at work in Africa for years. Jilly Bulalani of the Journal of African Affairs explains in her April 2021 book that China's exportation of an authoritarian version of the internet, including the proliferation of surveillance and firewall technologies, has helped to reassert Beijing's growing political footprint. Huawei has not lost a single order in years. So, Representative Gorin, you're right. China is encroaching, and it's worked, as Representative Liu proved for me. Chinese firms help these nations develop their physical infrastructure rather than just toss money at them. That's why they dominate 70% of all broadband. So, Representative Dixon, you cannot just assert that our aid is more attractive. There has not been a single solid warrant provided by the affirmative as to why Africa would completely abandon and rehaul existing technology provided to them by Beijing on the ground as we speak in favor of generic monetary allocations from the US. When you bless the rains down in Africa, who do you leave drowning?
Thank you, Representative, for that speech of 3 minutes and 5 seconds. We are now in line for 1 minute of questioning. Would all questioners please raise your placards? All right, that's going to go to Representative Dixon.
Recognizing me. So you recognize the fact that China is going to be giving this money to them. So they're getting the money either way. How does that uniquely solve for censorship?
Nothing about this bill solves for censorship. Nothing about China solves for censorship. All you're doing in this bill, the mechanism, is you're handing Africa a blank check every year with no conditions or stipulations on how it is.
If we're working with the African Union, with the government to make sure these funds are going to the right place, can't we see that this is going to be beneficial funding?
You haven't provided a single warrant as to why they would rehaul technology or infrastructure.
Representative, how does censorship get worse under today's legislation?
Because if you give Africa money with no conditions on how it's supposed to be used, and authoritarianism has no incentive to stop.
Censorship is already happening right now. Today, we give them a choice between America and China. Why is it better to choose China?
First, I tell you that they definitely choose China. There's no question about that. And
why?
Second, even if you have aid, it's not more attractive because
I told you free internet reduces government corruption and is better for the
question
people.
period has elapsed. Question period has elapsed. Speakers may be muted. Please, just a quick reminder not to go over that 30-second block. We also had a point of inquiry in the chat as to when the hard stop for this session is. That is going to be 11:15 Pacific Standard Time or 2:15 Central Standard Time. But moving on, seeing as that was a speech in negation, we are now line for a
Point of
speech.
inquiry.
Yes, Representative Jiang.
I believe, I'm not really sure about the hard stop, but I assumed that the parley had mentioned 1:15 p.m. Central Time.
Oh, maybe I did the conversion wrong. Yes, that would be 1:15. My apologies. All of these time zones kind of mix me up a little bit, but seeing as that was a negative speech, we are now in line for an affirmative speaker. Would all affirmative speakers please raise your placards? All right, that is going to go to Representative Sharda.
Thank the chair, the parley, and the PO, the judges here today. Whenever you guys are ready, please just give me a gesture and I can go ahead and begin my speech. Again, this is my second speech of the day, first time on this piece of legislation, and I'll be speaking in affirmation of Bill number 4. All right. Spending $100 doesn't seem bad when you get $200 back. Similarly, the negation's concern of investment is essentially $100 billion in return of a potential $2.6 trillion return. Representative Dixon's bill is a diamond in the rough, and for us not to harvest this diamond would be a shame. Not only can we partner with tech giants to create a more fair system, but we can change Africa's view of us from exploitation to empowerment. The UN itself says investing in Africa is good business and a sustainable corporate strategy for foreign investors. Advanced and emerging countries' governments and the private sector should leverage these profitable emerging investment opportunities. The best time to invest in Africa is now. Let me spell out the current state of internet in Africa. Sub-Saharan Africa is especially poor in internet connectivity. Only approximately 25% of its population had regular access in 2018. The lack of internet access is particularly critical during the pandemic as countries with better access to online platforms for business and education enjoy faster economic rebounds compared to unconnected economies. As of February 2021, this article from Borgen magazine specifically says that the infrastructure needed is already in place, but the funds to allow this infrastructure to function are not. And this bill covers that gap. Representative Noonan and Representative Baker, and essentially the entire negation, is worried about a loss of billions of dollars. And while this is feasible, allow me to be the one to dispel this concern once and for all. Over the next 5 years, COVID-19 is expected to delay economic growth, both in Africa and as well as the rest of the world. But the resilience of Africa's internet economy, coupled with private consumption, stronger development talent, and most importantly, this bill will continue to drive growth. The growing number of internet-based companies are introducing avenues for significant economic growth that will help create jobs, reduce poverty, and contribute to overcoming Africa's future development challenges. This report also notes that investment interest in Africa's digital startups boomed in 2019, with a $2.02 billion raised in equity funding. A further $350 million was raised in the first quarter of 2020. Now, the AFCFTA aims to reduce tariffs on 90% of all goods and facilitate free movements. And this, combined with the GDP, could return for the US $2.6 trillion. Representative Wu is concerned about China and censorship. Allow me to explain these claims, and while reasonable are unlikely, these two simply cancel out. There is censorship in Africa because of China, and when we intervene, both of these concerns are therefore dispelled. The excuse of Representative Jiang that this simply isn't good enough is not good enough. Pass this bill, for it opens up Africa to a world of sustainability and essentially helps each broken corner of the internet. Pass this bill.
Thank you, Representative, for that speech of 3 minutes and 8 seconds. We're now in line for 1 minute of questioning. Would all questioners please raise your placards? All right, that is going to go to Representative Wu.
Thanks. So there isn't a single component, not even a single word, not even a single letter of this bill that helps Africa build infrastructure from the United States point of view. Why would African nations choose to rehaul and revamp their existing infrastructure systems in favor of our aid? Can you explain that, Warren, for me?
That's a good question, and the answer is they don't need to. As you stated in your speech, these companies are fairly new. As of 2019, 96% of the infrastructure needed to implement all of this internet access is
there,
already
and it's
in place.
all come from China. Why would they abandon?
Representative Baker.
Hi, Representative. How can we achieve even moderate access to internet when we lack half of the funding needed for this?
So like the bill specifically states, it funds $40 billion of this.
Yes,
program.
but I proved we need 100 billion.
Right. So that's 100 billion for a specific outcome. For
Yeah,
that
for
100 billion, we
internet.
get $2.6 trillion back, essentially. And for us to get even half of that is still enough for us to pass.
Okay, but we won't get any of that because we're not hitting all or even close to all of Africa.
The question period has elapsed. Speakers may be muted. Seeing as that was an affirmative speech, we are now in line for a negative speech. Would all negative speakers please raise your placards? Representative Pascarella.
I think the chair high that is Representative Pascarella speaking for the second time today. Just any indication from the 4 judges and PO, and I'll be all ready to begin. And I'm also going to time myself, so I'll just get that set up now. All right, great. Everybody ready? All right, perfect. In the Panopticon prison designed by philosopher Jeremy Bentham, all the prison cells encircle and face a single guard tower. As a result, all the prisoners cannot be sure at which moment the guard is looking at them. So at all times, they assume the guard is looking at me, and I'll act like the guard is watching what I'm doing. In the same way, the internet functions very similarly. Despite an illusion of free and open internet and discussion inside of the internet, there is an understanding that all of us can be watched at any particular moment. But in Africa, this is not just a problem that jeopardizes personal privacy, but the very state of democracy. Fail. Let's divide today's debate into 2 main categories of people and how this legislation impacts them. Those that are being watched and the people that are doing the watching. First, let's understand how the people that are being watched, the low-income African people, are impacted by today's legislation. Representative Dixon tells you that today's legislation creates access for all African people. But what you have to understand is that access across the continent means that there are broadband cables across Africa. It doesn't mean it's affordable for every single person to get it. Look to Yomi Kazmi, an African reporter for the Alliance on Affordable Internet. In October of 2019, he tells you the majority of African countries rank on the bottom half of global internet affordability. This is the reason why so many people in Africa lack coverage right now. And the reason for that is that many companies, like the Chinese ones that Representatives Dixon and Gorin focus on, are monopolistically putting a chokehold on the industry. Today's legislation, if you pass it, only worsens that. If you want to have broadband access in Africa, you can only fund the companies that know what they're doing. Those companies in the status quo have that same monopolistic chokehold. They have the most capital and technological capability to meet the requirements this legislation places upon them. So Representative Dinesh, when you talk about mothers and children dying because they cannot afford internet access, understand, if they cannot afford the medical care that they need, they can also not afford the internet costs that are going to be placed upon them when the monopolies that raise those costs to such a high point only increase under our status quo. But second, let's talk about all those people that are doing the watching, the African governments. Representative Noonan talks about the possibility of suppression when you pass today's legislation. And Representative Wu starts to provide some examples for you. Allow me to finally put this contention to rest and tell you how today's legislation only increases suppression. Tunde Okoyuna, and a research official at the Council on Foreign Relations in January of 2019 explained that African dictatorships can use the internet to mold it to their own mass manipulation wills. For example, they tax the use of social media after seeing how activism on social media helped to topple a former dictator in Egypt. In addition, the Nigerian government also banned Twitter very recently, just a few months ago, because they saw the way that activism was able to mobilize against the police force in Nigeria using Twitter. Understand, Representative Liu, if you want the internet to spread the ideals of democracy, you have to make sure the people that can control the internet are not those that want to suppress the people's access to free and open information. The eyes of the guard tower are now upon you. Do the right thing and negate.
Thank you, Representative, for that speech of 3 minutes and 10 seconds exactly. We're now in line for 1 minute of questions. Would all questions please raise your placards? All right, that is going to go to, pardon me, that is going to go to Representative Gorin.
Hi, Representative. So I'm confused. The United States does not support Huawei or any of those Chinese internet companies, correct?
Sure.
Okay, so how exactly does this money somehow go to Huawei?
Just
Or-
because we ban Huawei like domestically doesn't mean that when we go to Africa and need to find a company that can install broadband, it doesn't mean that we can't use them anymore.
So-
We're still going to need to use the
So
most
today,
experienced companies.
This money is going towards research and development. What's stopping us from creating future funds through companies that we will have oversight over?
So the U.S. government is just going to create like new companies in Africa.
Representative
I don't really see how it's
Dixon.
gonna work.
Thank you. Aren't we seeing an up to 13% increase in quality jobs for Africans regardless of education level?
Even if that is true, you have to prove that that 13% increase can account for the fact that internet in some areas of Africa is more expensive than it is in the US.
Okay, but the whole point of the bill is to provide affordable internet access, right?
This legislation doesn't specify what affordable is.
Well, wouldn't you say that by definition, it's going to mean that people of Africa can afford it?
That would be great if the legislation
And
set
aren't
a
we going to
price
see
cap
job
on what the
creation for
internet
lower income Africans, meaning they can afford it in the future?
Question period has elapsed. Speakers may be muted. Reminder to please, thanks you. Reminder to please not speak over each other if you can prevent it, just because the judges can't understand what you're saying and thus can't score you. Seeing as that was a negative speech, we are now in line for an affirmative speech. Would all affirmative speakers please raise your placards? Representative Barreau, you have the floor unopposed.
I thank the chair. Hey, everybody, that's Representative Barreau, spelled Barrau. I'm just going to take a couple seconds of silence as an indication that you guys are ready, but if you have any issues, just go ahead and interrupt. Okay, perfect. Africa is not a monolith. There are over 1.2 billion different voices to hear, faces to see, and stories to tell. The farmer in Uganda lives a vastly different life than the banker in Kenya. But if there's one thing that's universal, it's the struggle to access the internet of the 21st century. Pass this bill to help billions overcome one common obstacle to all craft their own different paths. Let's look to the two main clashes of today's debate. First, the role of the African Union and the US in the region. Representative Noonan, in cross-examination with Representative Dixon, asked a very important question. What makes the African Union the most qualified organization for the legislation? In her own speech, Representative Noonan doubled down on this idea by discussing AU inefficiency. One response to this notion: the alternative to passing this legislation is allowing China to grow their role in the region. But Representative Dixon already told you about growing involvement of China. But Representative Wu, in cross-examination with Representative Gorin, wants to know what specific approach China uses. Allow me to answer your question, Representative Wu. Nikkei Asia Business Review reports in January 2021 that under the Belt and Road Initiative, China has launched a new program called the Digital Silk Road, creating broadband internet access. And now that they're finished with their reconstruction in Pakistan, they're looking towards African countries as their new target. So even if we did take Representative Noonan's claims about the negative impacts of aid we supply at their highest ground, if the US refuses to step in, China will not hesitate to fill the void. And it's not a matter of if, it's when. But even at that, second, let's discuss the other clash of today's debate, which is the impact of a Chinese state. Representative Noonan acknowledged in cross-examination that China is in fact the one to fill the void in the region if we fail today's legislation. But Representative Zhang seems to be countering that idea when she talks about the role of private companies within the region. Make no mistake, Chinese influence will increase if we fail. And let's explain exactly why that's such a bad thing. See, Representative Wu argues that Taiwan won't move from China. I'd argue that we will principally because it's cheaper. Right now, China uses loans that force countries to pay back more than they were ever given. So when you pass today's legislation and offer them an alternative that pays relatively no money, they're going to be making that switch, regardless of the fact that they've already invested in Chinese firms. But even at that, second, Representative Wu and Prascarilla both advocate a position of decreasing censorship. Even if we took them at their highest ground, censorship happens regardless. The impacts are just felt more when you fail today's legislation. When you pass, you protect civil liberties, because as the Africa Center for Strategic Studies reports in December 2020, in areas in Africa where the Chinese firm Huawei has built some broadband infrastructure, governments are using its surveillance on their people, making many scared to use their voice. It's time to change that. But even at that, third, you hold China accountable. A March 2018 study published by the College of William and Mary found that African countries and programs like the BRI vote in favor of China at UN human rights disputes 10% more often for every 86% increase in assistance they get. China is using the expansion of internet access as a bribe in order to gain greater political power. That is the impact you feel. That is the reason you pass.
Representative, that speaks 3 minutes and 9 seconds. We're now in line for 2 blocks of questions. Would all questioners please raise their placards? All right, that is going to go to Representative Pascarilla.
If an African dictator now knows that under today's legislation, they have the entirety of the African people being accessed with internet, can't they increase their censorship and their suppression?
The point of today's legislation and the United States' involvement is to counteract that. The best hands are our own, and passing today's legislation gives us a stake in the region, gives us some oversight over the AU, and solves for those issues. The reason that that's happening is because China is the one who's responsible for all of the broadband infrastructure in Africa.
What authority does the US government have to say how the Congo government should control the internet?
Representative Jiang.
Thank you. So this legislation funds research and development, right? Other representatives have said that?
Yes.
Okay, and infrastructure, would you say it's more substantial than research?
Infrastructure is a more right now solution.
Okay.
Research and development is
Right.
a long-term solution.
But how does research and development make Africa choose us over China, which is actually providing infrastructure?
All of the infrastructure and aid that we provide under today's legislation.
But we're not providing infrastructure
As I just explained to you, anything that China provides to them is paid more up in the long term than it would be upfront. That means they're charging interest on all
The question period has elapsed. Speakers may be muted. All right, seeing as everyone has spoken.
Motion. Yeah.
Representative Jiang.
I move to previous question.
Is there a second? All right, seeing unanimous consent and hearing no objections, we will move to the previous question on this bill. All right, all those who are in favor of passing today's bill, please raise your placard and only lower it once I call your name. I see Representative Dixon, Representative Liu, Representative Sharda, Representative Barreau, and Representative Gorin, and Representative Dinesh. All those in favor of failing today's piece of legislation, please raise your placard. Representative Pascarella, Representative Baker, Representative Zhang, and Representative Wu, and Representative Noonan. All right, on a vote of 6-5, this piece of legislation does pass. My congratulations to today's sponsor, Representative Dixon.
Motion.
Representative Gorin.
Seeing a natural break in debate, I move for a 5-minute recess.
Is there a second on that? All right, hearing no objections, I'm going to assume unanimous consent, and we will now move for a 5-minute recess. Please return back at 11 minutes past the hour.
Before everyone returns, so if assuming the fact that we come back at 11:11 PST, which is 2:11 PST, there isn't going to be enough time to do a full cycle on the next item of legislation. So why don't we start the next what do you call it again? The next session, that's the word. Next session with meat and dairy, and then we'll go to TPP, and then we'll go to housing.
I would vastly prefer to
just
debate.
Can we not just have an indefinite recess till the start of the next session?
We can go ahead and just do that for the remaining time.
This is a question that I was asking at the beginning of our round, which is, do people want to have meat and dairy instead of single family housing? Can we ask that question? So if you would prefer meat and dairy, raise a placard over single family, because I really think we're only gonna get to 2. All right, so that's 1, 2, 3 in support of meat and dairy. And then instead, if you would prefer to speak on single family housing, could you raise a placard?
So what we can do is, because the whole splits for the next session, right? We're not going to have to deal with the elections and stuff like that. We'll probably have enough time to actually get through the 3 items of legislation.
But
That would.
I don't know.
Yeah, but if we want to talk
competition
about
for-
the first 2 on there more, we're not going to get through a full cycle of debate on the 3rd bill. So we can amend the docket and put meat and dairy after zoning.
Or can't we just table meat and dairy at the
That's what
beginning of the
we'll
next
do.
session?
So why don't we do this? Why don't we table meat and dairy, which we can actually do right now when we get back at like 11:15 or 2:11. That's the right time. So once we come back, and we can go ahead and table the item of legislation. That way we could start with TPP, then go to single family zoning, and then go to meat and dairy.
I think if we table meat and dairy, then technically it goes after universal internet.
No, we have to take it off the table.
Yeah, we would take it off the table.
We can take it off the table whenever.
Yeah.
So I guess I have a motion then.
You don't have to motion right now. We're still in recess.
Yeah, we're in the recess.
Oh, okay.
We can just do that after our recess has adjourned.
Yeah.
Can we motion to end the recess early? Or is anyone actually gone?
In case, I'm not sure if the judges are still away for now or someone.
Yeah, they might be gone. We can wait.
Everyone's okay.
Oh, okay, they're here. Okay.
Okay, everyone's here. So if the party's okay with that, because that might be a slight breach in procedure, but.
Are we missing Judge Armstrong?
Oh
no,
Judge Armstrong is here.
I'm okay with that if the chamber's okay with that.
Motion.
Okay, cool. Representative Dixon.
Motion to end the recess early.
Is there a second? All those in favor? Seeing clear unanimous consent, we'll now end the recess early. Representative Gorin.
I move to table the next item of legislation on the docket, meat and dairy.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor of tabling, please raise a placard. All right, seeing clear unanimous consent, we will move to table the meat and dairy bill, and then we can deal with the procedure after that. Okay. Representative Gorin, do you have another motion?
I do. So seeing that we've wrapped up everything on the list for today for now, I move to adjourn.
Is there a second? Perfect. Then we will adjourn for this session and I will go through my orders of the day. Great job, everyone. This was a fantastic round of debate and I'm so proud of you again for making it this far, especially if you are a senior. Congratulations on surviving another round. And if this is your end of the road, you have had a fantastic career and that is something to be proud of. So we ended up getting through 52 questions and 22 speeches. So we had a very active chamber and a very respectful chamber, I might add. Thank you guys for your decorum. We failed one piece of legislation and we passed another. While I am in this position, I just wanted to take a moment to remind everyone here and at home that it is your duty as a competitor, as a coach, or as a supporter of the speech and debate community to help make this the most accepting and welcoming place possible. That means staking up for people who already have natural disadvantages and those who have disparities. So just a reminder that you should be doing that in your own community and both on the national circuit. Thank you all so much for allowing me to be your presiding officer today. That is Representative Klaus, spelled C-L-A-U-S, and I am a competitor. So if you believe that I did a good job today, I would hope that your rankings would reflect that. With that, that is all I have. Thank you all so much. Did our parley have anything to add?
I do not have anything to add other than I believe they changed our start time, which I mentioned in the chat. But if there's anybody who did not see that, our new start time for the afternoon session is at 2:30 p.m., which is a half hour later than originally scheduled. And we will officially start at 3 p.m. Central Time, ending at 5:30 Central Time. So if you need to make any adjustments for that, keep that in mind. And thank you guys. Like your presiding officer said, this is a very respectful and efficient chamber. You got through lots of speeches and questions. So good job. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you everyone for your time and see you next session.
Yeah, great job, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank
Thank you so much to the PO.
Bye-bye.
Thank you guys.
Oh,
And thank you to our judges.
Thank you so
Yes,
much.
thank you everyone for judging. I know this was a long time to sit and watch us just chat for 40 minutes. Y'all have better things to be doing as well, so thank you. Bye.
And then Tab just wanted me to remind judges that the presiding officer should have 2 separate speech scores, I guess, roughly for the first half and the second half. And then they want to submit ballots as soon as possible, and you can go back and edit comments later if you need to. But Tab just wants the rankings as soon as possible. So thank you very much. And thank you for being our replacement judge when we're missing someone. Appreciated your flexibility. And that is all I have. So thank you and enjoy your afternoon.
Yeah, thank you. And I'll submit my ballot as soon as possible.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Bye.